You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Welcome to True Spies, the podcast that takes you deep inside the greatest secret missions of all time.
Suddenly, out of the darkness appeared Bin Laden.
You'll meet the people who live life undercover. What do they know? What are their skills? And what would you do in their position?
Vengeance felt good. Seeing these people pay for what they'd done felt righteous.
True Spies from Spyscape Studios, wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Jenny Williamson.
And I'm Jen McMenemy.
And this is Ancient History Fangirl, the first 3 Cleopatra and Marc Antony episodes, all in one place. Lovers in a dangerous time.
Swoon!
If you have listened to our episode with Barry Strauss on the Battle of Actium, we thought maybe your appetite would be whetted to revisit this series or to listen to it for the first time if you haven't heard it before. He was such a great tour guide to that beach and that battle at Actium. We just had so much fun. You should listen to it. It's called Actium Baby. It just made us go back in our minds to that time in these episodes, which we had just such a blast writing and recording.
We picked this series because it's just so much fun. This is the epic story of Marc Can't Count Past 12 Antony and Cleopatra, beginning just after Julius Caesar's assassination and continuing to their epic meeting along the Cydnus River by the ancient city of Tarsus. Their incredible partnership that spanned decades and outlived Marc Antony's 2 other marriages. The famous excesses of their partying and feasting together. Oh, those inimitable livers. And finally, their desperate and dramatic end when they took their own lives.
Words cannot express how much we love this series. We included the first 3 in this giant file, and if you want to know what happens next, those episodes, parts 4 and 5, are of course in our back catalog. They're easy to find, and we hope you go on to listen to those as well, and then maybe re-listen to that episode that we did with Barry Strauss, Actium Baby, which delved in detail into the famous Battle of Actium. Because all of this is just such a blast, it's just so much fun, and whatever happens this summer, I have a feeling we're all going to need a little bit of a break mentally.
This is one of those arcs. I mean, obviously the end is not fun, but there's a lot of levity here, and that's why we chose this. There's a lot of love. There's a lot of cattiness between political power players in Rome. It's just something to hopefully take you out of the darkest timeline for a little bit. So we hope you have a great summer, and we'll be back September 22nd.
Here comes the new Dionysus, bitches! They're lighting fires in the city now. You can see them burning, standing where you are on the breezy portico that looks out over the mile-wide garden on the outskirts of Rome. Rolling emerald lawns dotted with fountains and statues, sheltered groves and grottos where once you entertained your lover in shaded privacy. He's been dead less than a week. The body you loved riddled with stab wounds and sent up in ashes. Once yours in the gardens and the sleepy porticos, then for a fevered, bloody moment he belonged to the assassins, and now up in smoke to the gods. The son you bore him is asleep and unknowing. Your second child grows in your belly, and now you're alone in the world. The streets of Rome have erupted in violence. They light fires to illuminate the streets, fires to destroy whole neighborhoods, fires to drive back the dark and restore order. It doesn't work. At your knees, the city is thrashing and raging, caught in the grip of its grief. You feel no kinship with people in the streets. You are a queen and goddess after all. But this night you have this rage, this grief in common. He was taken from you, too. The night of Caesar's murder, the night of the Ides, a single star streaked its brilliance across the sky. It's been there every time you looked up, casting madness on the city, its gravity stirring ghosts out of the dust. The priests burned sacrifices and pronounced their prophecies. The gods say nothing one way or another. The sky burns over your heads. Now you can smell the thunderstorm. It's coming, a black tower of clouds that threatens beyond the city, and a wind picks up at your feet. You've lived through these storms before, thunderclaps that that shake the walls, strewing the elegant garden with down trees and roof tiles. The child stirs in your belly as if to echo your thoughts. You are in agreement. Caesar's gone. There is nothing in Rome for you now. Caesar ended your civil war and gave you your kingdom. There's no guarantee of safety, returning home with no Roman protector to shore up your power. You may be returning to knives in the dark, to conspiracies and insurrection, but you can't stay here. It's only a matter of time before Rome turns its attention across the Tiber to Caesar's garden villa, before the city turns its fury on you. Your manservant awaits your orders. You turn to him, drawing your cloak up over your face. Wake the child, you tell him. Gather my things and ready the ships. It's time to go. I'm Jenny Williamson.
And I'm the severed head of Crassus in the play The Bacchae.
And this is Ancient History Fangirl. I'm so excited to be doing this episode with the severed head of Crassus. This has literally never happened in the history of Ancient History Fangirl before.
He just inserts himself into every episode in any way he can.
Nobody's asked for more Crassus, and yet here we have more Crassus. So just picture me and the severed head of Crassus talking for the next hour or so, however long this winds up being.
Just held up like Medusa's head.
The week... I'm dying. The week after the Ides of March, 44 BC, was a week of portents and magic. Julius Caesar had been I'm sorry. I just can't. I'm just picturing me and the severed head of Crassus.
Just take some time. Forget I said it.
Like trailing gore onto the table. Tripping on the microphone.
Petrifying everything it sees.
I might turn to stone, but luckily I don't have to look at the severed head of Crassus to do an episode with it.
Well, why should you? I am in London at the time.
That's true, and apparently so is the severed head of Crassus. You would think it's actually in Parthia. I mean, the time difference.
Actually, he's back in stage left waiting to go on in the final act of the Bacchae.
That's right. He's broadcasting from backstage in the Bacchae. He's going to have to go on at any minute.
He's just backstage in the wings waiting for his epic appearance.
His whole second life in the Parthian Theater Company.
But there's one thing we can agree on. In that second life, he had fierce eyeliner.
Oh my God, yes. Because obviously. So anyway, we're moving on. The week after the Ides of March, 44 BC, was a week of portents and magic. Julius Caesar had been stabbed to death by a group of his closest friends and allies. His wound-riddled body lay in state for days before being carried through the streets and burned in the Forum, the flames from his funeral pyre taking several public buildings with them. Meanwhile, in Caesar's lavish garden villa on the outskirts of the city, his lover and the mother of his son, the Ptolemaic queen Cleopatra, watched the skies. She was 25 years old, pregnant with his second child, and now she was alone.
We imagine from this villa, Cleopatra had Go slow, severed head of Crassus.
Severed head of Crassus needs to stop flubbing his lines.
You know what? He's used to just being there for the shock value.
He usually doesn't have lines. I mean, this is a whole new thing.
We imagine from this villa, Cleopatra had an unrestricted view of the city of Rome, which was studded with fires, some started by riots, others lit to keep public order. The day after the funeral, a violent thunderstorm lashed the city, while a bloodthirsty mob stalked the streets, baying for the murderer's blood. The week after the assassination, a comet streaked the sky, the Julian star, later used as a sign that Caesar should be deified. Because of course.
I mean, does he even need a sign?
He would say no. We don't even have to ask him. We just know that much. In life, Caesar had housed Cleopatra in this elaborate garden villa, and here he spent hours with her in a frenzy of energy in the year before his death, plotting and planning with her and her astronomers and scientists, philosophers and priests on the great transformation he had planned for Rome. A better calendar, massive public works, a great library to draw the leading scholars from all over the world. And that was only the beginning.
But now the villa was quiet as a tomb, and Cleopatra was being evicted. Caesar had left the house to the public in his will. Rome was dangerous for Cleopatra. The city itself was plunged into chaos in the wake of its dictator's death. The question of who would rule Rome, under what kind of government, and what violence might be meted out to whom in the transition was still deciding itself. Cleopatra had to go. So about a week after Caesar's funeral, Cleopatra sailed back to her city, Alexandria, the capital of Egypt, to pick up the pieces. she would never return to Rome.
The consequences of Caesar's murder were not small for her, because her rule was entirely dependent on the favor of Rome. Caesar had been her consort and benefactor. He'd settled a civil war in her favor and given her the military strength to hold power in her own volatile kingdom. But now everything was up in the air. If Caesar's assassins took power, Cleopatra and her son Caesarion might be their next target. When she stepped on her ship back to Alexandria, Cleopatra was pregnant again, with a second child of Caesar's. But in the months following her return home, she lost the child, probably to a miscarriage. Within weeks, Cleopatra was back in her hometown, grand, gorgeous Alexandria, a city that made Rome look positively provincial. Big, serious questions loomed on the horizon, questions to do with her alliances to Rome, her kingdom's continued survival, and her own. Rome would be back in her life again eventually. But for now, Cleopatra had to do what she could to shore up her power on her own.
Kraft Mac and Cheese is better than 90s hip-hop. We'll remind you of your childhood without making you feel incredibly old. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Best thing ever.
Cleopatra's first step was to deal with her remaining little brother, Ptolemy XIV. I'm 11! Who was also her husband, although he's older than 11 now.
He's not 11!
As Queen of Egypt, Cleopatra was supposed to rule alongside a husband, preferably also a close relative, like really close, like her brother, to keep the line pure. But Cleopatra knew how this went. She'd been, quote-unquote, married to her other little brother, Ptolemy XIII, when she'd first met Caesar. They were supposed to rule together, but their power struggle had plunged Egypt into civil war. When Caesar had settled that war in Cleopatra's favor, he'd made Ptolemy XIV her consort. He'd been only 11 then, but now he was 17, I guess. The numbers are wonky. Old enough to want some power for himself. If he wasn't a threat to her rule now, he soon would be. So one of the first things Cleopatra did when she got back to Alexandria was have Ptolemy XIV murdered. He was dead by end of summer, probably poisoned. Some sources say it was aconite, and if you want to know more about aconite, you know where to look.
Where do they look, Jenny?
Locusta the Poisoner.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know about aconite, you should definitely check out Locusta the Poisoner, which is one of our episodes where we talk about ancient world poison. It's fascinating. That's why I'm not going into aconite here, because we already talked about it.
We did, and this is my warning. If somebody ever makes you blueberry pancakes, don't trust them.
Don't trust the pancakes.
Unless they're chocolate chip.
Even then, I would be wary of any and all pancakes that you do not have a taste or try first, especially if Jen makes them for you.
Why would I make pancakes when I could have someone make them for me?
Well, right. I mean, the severed head of Crassus doesn't have hands to make pancakes with, so... Because the Egyptian public expected their queen to rule with a male consort, she raised her son Caesarion to the throne. He was 3 years old, and for the time being, not a threat. Cleopatra had reset the clock on having to share power. And I think this is actually really interesting, Jen, because this is kind of a problem sometimes for women who take power on behalf of young sons. You know, we saw Agrippina the Younger deal with this, with Nero.
Exactly. And, you know, it's just a temporary measure because eventually your young son is going to hit their majority and they're not going to want mom around anymore. Necessarily. Even if you are sleeping with them. Agrippina, we're side-eyeing you right now.
Right, in the litter or not in the litter. Just listen to Dux Femina for an in-depth discussion about whether Nero and Agrippina were having sex in a litter.
Definitely not in the litter.
This is the kind of serious academic question we get into.
And then Cleopatra threw herself energetically into reminding her people exactly who the queen was, because there could be no mistake who the queen was here, people.
Right. We don't want anyone forgetting who the queen was.
The summer of 44 BC was, for Cleopatra, a summer of festivals. She stepped back into the ritual role she'd embraced at the very beginning of her reign, before her civil war. This role, drawing on her gift of spectacle to throw lavish celebrations of religious holidays, both cemented her presence as a populist and made her highly visible as a goddess and leader to the Egyptian public. Throughout the summer of 44 BC, Cleopatra presided over the summer fertility rites that always came with the flooding of the Nile, often dressed as the goddess Isis, a deity she was strongly associated with. And I just want to stop for a minute because I found something interesting when I was doing some research on Dionysus and the early folklore of the Mediterranean and wider regions. And most things actually had their new year beginning when the Nile flooded, because it goes back to Egypt.
And when was that?
It was in the summer. So instead of having your new year begin like we traditionally do now in January, it actually began began in the summer, because that was their season when everything sort of returned and it would be a renewed life. And it all goes back to the Nile.
Fascinating.
She also embarked on an ambitious public works campaign, overseeing the construction of several elaborate temples. One, the Temple of Dendera, was associated with her son Caesarion. It showed Caesarion burning incense for the gods Osiris, Isis, and Horus, while Cleopatra appeared in full Isis regalia behind him, shaking a holy rattle.
Cleopatra also made plans to construct an enormous public building, the Caesareum, to honor Julius Caesar. Not to be confused with her son Caesarion, it's the Caesareum. With an M.
U-M, not O-N.
That's right. Whole different thing. One is a building, one is a person. One is a salad.
No salad, no.
Not a salad. We've established this.
I mean, it is a delicious salad. Chicken Caesar salad is one of my favorites.
Julius Caesar isn't a salad, even if the salad is delicious. Can we just establish this fact?
I could debate this, but then he'll appear, and we don't have time for that.
I mean, I think we left the door open, didn't we?
We left the door open, but we haven't even got to the bit about Marc Antony and Cleopatra meeting, and you know he's going to have shit to say about that.
He refused. Okay, he refused to come to our rehearsal the other night. Refused.
Flat out refused. He was like, Julius Caesar doesn't do rehearsals.
Right, and we were just like, all right, Julius Caesar, you know what? We had booze here. We were going to have a good time, but you know what? We're not going to...
We had a whole amphora of the best Falernian I could find, which is, barefoot wine that I got from the off license, but it could be Falernian.
It was $2 Chuck, really, let's be honest. Actually, it's $4 Chuck now.
If only that was enough to tempt him.
Yeah, we always have the cheapest ass wine.
I mean, sometimes it's about quantity, guys.
Sometimes it's about what can I fill my giant crater with?
What can I fill my war elephant stomach with?
Exactly. Anyway, Cleopatra had also made plans to construct an enormous public building, the Caesareum, to honor Julius Caesar. The building was positioned right by the harbor with a magnificent view of the sea. It would ultimately encompass an entire neighborhood, complete with boardwalks, courts, groves of trees, porticos, gardens, libraries, and an endless array of priceless art that was probably mostly looted from conquered communities. Cleopatra moved the twin obelisks, now known as Cleopatra's Needles, created more than 1,200 years before she was born, from Heliopolis to decorate this building. The Caesareum wasn't completed in Cleopatra's lifetime, but its construction began in that busy, fevered year after Caesar's death.
Cleopatra also led an intellectual revival in Alexandria in the months after Caesar's death. Alexandria was home to the Great Library of Alexandria and its sister institution, the Museum. In these buildings, the world's most eminent scholars were given 3 square meals and a free place to live, with all the world's knowledge and a community of other leading multidisciplinary thinkers at their fingertips, and the Ptolemies were their one and only patron. I mean, Jenny, that's clearly where we belong.
Are they still taking applications for residencies or what?
I mean, did you hear about the fire?
Multiple fires.
This is why we can't have nice things.
It's Julius Caesar's fault, obviously.
Always.
Constantly.
So, like Julius Caesar, Cleopatra had a brilliant, intellectually curious mind. In the months after Caesar's death, she surrounded herself with the Mediterranean world's preeminent thinkers in philosophy, oratory, medicine, science, literature, and astronomy, and pursued her own interest in these topics, possibly as just one of the many refuges from grief.
It's tough to find Cleopatra's scholarship in Western sources because later propaganda distorted her image and worked really hard to erase anything positive about her. But interestingly, Cleopatra appears in some Arab sources as a notable scholar. I had a hard time finding direct original sources on this, but Stacy Schiff, in her book Cleopatra: A Life, mentions that Cleopatra appears as a respected scholar in the Talmud with an interest in science and medicine. There are even stories that Cleopatra oversaw surgical experiments on female prisoners to determine when a fetus became an embryo.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of makes sense to me. She's just probably had this miscarriage. She's the divine Cleopatra, and there might be a part of her that's curious about what happened.
First off, this is clearly extremely ethically dubious. Can we just get that out?
Yeah, this is a horrible, horrid thing to do to anyone.
And we do not approve. Not okay, Cleopatra. We disapprove strongly.
Drawing that line in the sand, not okay.
Apparently, this line needs to be drawn.
It needs to aggressively be drawn, but from the insatiable need to know why this thing has happened to this divine person.
I bet she was dealing with some serious postpartum.
Well, I don't know if that's what she was dealing with. I bet she had an insatiable grief here. She's lost Caesar. She's lost the second child that they were going to have together. There has to be something inside of her at this point in time that is probably really, really broken. I don't want to label it because we can't label people who lived thousands of years ago. It's possible she had post-miscarriage depression, as well as her grief for the loss of Caesar and this life that she thought she was building in Rome. Like, all of these things coupled together could have maybe explained where this weird fascination came from. Again, not okay.
And I'm not saying that postpartum depression leads you naturally to want to conduct experiments on people, because that's horrible.
Not saying that. That is not where we're going. We're just saying her headspace was probably not where it would have been. And there are many mitigating factors that coupled together may explain this strange turn of events we're seeing.
It was just such a random fact that I found, and Jen kind of brought it together for me when we were talking about it, because I was just like, this is just totally random. And Jen was like, well, no, I bet it totally had to do with her miscarriage. And also, like, she's a goddess on Earth, and she probably believes that hype, or at least partially believes that hype, you know? So what does it mean when a goddess on Earth miscarries? How can this even happen?
And remember, she was in the process of making Caesar the son of Venus and being this deified leader. And he's just been assassinated. Like, her entire world has been shook.
It's like her entire concept of herself and of Caesar as deities, which, I mean, maybe they just sort of didn't believe that and they were cynically manipulating public belief in that area.
I mean, I think it's a bit of both.
I think it was a bit of both. Like, I think at least partially they really did believe their own hype in that area.
It's totally possible. And it was one of those things that clicked in my head. Oh, she's actually gone through quite a lot. She's had a really shit year. This is only a year later.
Right. Not to say that if you have a shit year, you should perform Dr. Mengele style experiments on people.
We've all had shit years. Both Jenny and I have suffered with different mental illnesses and things like that in the past, and neither of us have ever gone down this route or would.
Somehow we managed to get through it without pulling this shit. Cleopatra, what are you doing?
Well, Cleopatra needed like some talk space or better help therapy, clearly.
This is a point where you start seeing your friend doing stuff like this and you're like, I think you're in a really dark mental place right now, and I think you should talk to a professional.
Yeah, I think like just our normal like chat sessions over the wine and opium that we've been smoking are not cutting it. Because Cleopatra definitely smoked opium, guys.
Probably she did, yeah.
I did not do the primary research, so I'm just saying stuff. I'm just Crassus's head repeating the rumors.
I mean, look, nobody's holding Crassus's head accountable for anything in this podcast. Let's be real. It's all on me. Look at the partner I have to work with here. Jen pieced out early, and now I have a severed head.
Boo.
Stop it, Crassus's head. You're creeping me out.
I'm not creeping you out. You just can't handle my eyeliner game. It's so fierce.
That's true. I can't even look at it. It's too fierce.
So, interestingly, around Shakespeare's time, the 1500s, early modern English writers often cited a now lost Book of Cleopatra, reputed to contain Cleopatra's own writings and discoveries on topics such as natural science, natural history, surgery, medicine, and cosmetics. Lots of people in this time period cited the Book of Cleopatra as an authoritative source, including a physician, an expert on insects, and a surgeon. And I get so angry right now because we have Pliny the Elder's natural history, but we don't have the Book of Cleopatra.
First off, I would love to get her makeup tips.
Yeah, number one. Number two, it's like Agrippina's commentaries or whatever it was that she was keeping. Like, we don't have those either.
Agrippina's autobiography. We don't have that.
It just makes me so angry because we don't have enough sources from women's mouths of what their life was like. And these were two massive figures of the ancient world.
Well, it's just a bunch of dudes deciding that women don't have a voice. Only dudes' voices matter. I'm not angry. I'm not about to chew the furniture. I'm fine.
We're okay. It's all good. It's fine.
It's unbecoming for ladies to get angry.
The world is burning. It's a giant tire fire. It's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. It's fine. Let's read this paragraph.
So one of the things attributed to the Book of Cleopatra was a cure for baldness, a recipe for a paste made from flies, ground up mice, horse's teeth, and bear grease, which was to be rubbed on the balding scalp until it sprouts, like a chia pet.
I mean, I just have to ask, was she putting this on Julius Caesar's head? And did she know that this actually did not improve baldness and it was just an excuse to put gross stuff on Caesar's head?
Crickets.
Well, I wasn't asking Caesar, Jen. I was asking you what you thought.
Oh, yeah. Fuck yeah, she was. And then after she took it off, she was like, look, it's growing back. It's so lush and thick, Caesar.
Oh, honey, I think it's actually working. Like, look, I think I see a few more hairs.
I mean, they didn't have, like, proper mirrors.
No. I mean, how's he gonna know? Like, he's just taking her word for it.
Absolutely.
Some of this information, especially the info about the shady experiments, may be untrue or exaggerated or written to demonize Cleopatra. We don't know. But what we do know is that in Alexandria, Cleopatra had the most learned scholars in the known world from the Library of Alexandria as her tutors and dinner companions. She was intensely intellectual, educated, and curious about everything, and she was raised to see herself as a living goddess on earth who may well have believed that she could do anything to anybody. So I don't find these claims to be totally off the wall here.
So, for the next year or so, while Rome was sorting itself out, Cleopatra kept busy, presiding over festivals in her elaborate Isis gear, leading an intellectual revival, building lavish temples, conducting very ethically dubious experiments, and murdering her little brother. You know, that is one bujo that I do not want to get my hands on.
Or do you?
Or do I? But everything wasn't all coming up Cleopatra all the time. A bad spring growing season resulted in widespread famine. Inflation forced Cleopatra to devalue her currency again. She'd done this once before when Caesar demanded she pay off all her father's debts to Rome, despite the fact that she had just borne him a son and, you know, he had an excellent 13-month honeymoon in her love shack palace. But hey, Caesar, not cool. And on top of all this, there was a breakout of bubonic plague. Then, in the midst of all of this, in 43 BC, about a year after Caesar's death, just 1 year, Rome finally came knocking.
The first Roman to appear on Cleopatra's doorstep was Dolabella. You remember Dolabella, right, Jen?
Refresh my memory.
So we first met Dolabella in our last episode on Fulvia. He was Antony's former friend who'd slept with Antony's wife and then started a gang war with Marc Antony over debt policy, which Antony won because he was married to Fulvia, who was the original gangster of ancient Rome. We talk about that in our last episode. But now, over in Rome, Dolabella was involved in the power struggles between the Caesarian faction, Caesar's supporters, and the liberators, those allied with Caesar's assassins. Dolabella was a Caesarian, and when he sent a message to Cleopatra asking for help, she sent him the 4 legions Caesar had originally left in Alexandria for her protection after the Alexandrian War. In return, she got Dolabella to promise that once he was in control, he'd recognize Caesarion as the rightful ruler of Egypt.
Cleopatra was in a bind here. She'd gotten her kingdom through Roman support, first from Pompey and then from Caesar. Her own army had been severely weakened in the Alexandrian War. Most of her military strength was in Roman troops Caesar had left her, which she'd now just sent to Dolabella. Cleopatra's continued rule depended on allying herself with Rome. But at the moment, there was no Rome. There was only a seething mass of competing factions, all of which would no doubt demand grain, money, ships, and troops from her. No matter who she chose to back, the cost would doubtless be ruinous, and choosing the wrong one would seal her own downfall. It seems that Cleopatra would have strongly preferred to back people from the Caesarian faction. Makes sense. But if the assassin side came knocking, she couldn't afford to be too picky. She had to weigh her options carefully, because it was entirely possible Caesar's assassins would win. And if they did, she had to find a way to work with them if she wanted to keep her kingdom.
Cleopatra's 4 legions never made it to Dolabella. They were intercepted by Cassius, one of the assassins. He turned around and demanded Cleopatra sent him even more aid. And Cleopatra made her excuses. I'm sorry, Cassius, the plague, there's been a plague, there's been a famine. I am all tapped out over here, Cassius, sorry. Meanwhile, behind Cassius's back, she was scrounging together more troops for Dolabella, but her own general in Cyprus disobeyed her, dispatching those troops to Cassius instead. Cassius defeated Dolabella in July of 43. Not long after that, Caesar's assassin Brutus faced his final showdown against Marc Antony and Octavian. This time, it was Marc Antony and Octavian who sent a message to Cleopatra asking for troops and ships. Cleopatra enthusiastically responded, raising ships and supplies in a time of famine, and then leading the flotilla herself to make sure everything got there safely. When he heard, Cassius was so enraged that he began to plan a full-on invasion of Egypt. And this would have been a disaster for Cleopatra because her country really was weakened by plague and famine. It wasn't just an excuse. Cassius mobilized to wrest Egypt from her control, only to be pulled away by an urgent missive from Brutus to come and help him fight Octavian and Antony.
So Cleopatra acted fast, commanding her flagship at the head of a fleet bound for Antony and Octavian. But a sudden storm battered her ships, sinking most of her fleet. Cleopatra took sick at sea and barely made it home. While a few ancient writers treat this as another excuse, an ally of Cassius who was waiting to ambush Cleopatra reported seeing wreckage and corpses from her fleet floating in the water. So Cleopatra dragged her carcass home, having used up most of her troops and ships and endangered her health, and secured no new Roman allies for her costly and dangerous efforts. It was a massive fail.
Massive fail.
Julius Caesar would like to remind the living goddess Cleopatra.
Hold up. Julius Caesar has something to say, everyone. Stop what you're doing and listen.
As I was saying, Julius Caesar would like to remind the living goddess Cleopatra that you do not get in a ship and go to these clowns. These clowns come to you and worship at your feet. You are Cleo-fucking-Patra.
Thank you, Julius Caesar.
And especially, my darling Cleopatra, do not get in a ship from Marc Antony. He can't count past 12.
Really? This explains so much about Marc Antony. I mean, Julius Caesar, aren't you proud of her right now? She's doing so much.
I'm immensely proud of her and of the determination that she has to see her people properly supported by whoever rules in Rome. Although we both know Cleopatra, the only side to ever support was the Caesarians. But that's fine.
She has to do what she has to do, listen.
Yes, I understand you must play the odds, as they say. But do not go to them. They come to you. And if they come to you and you do not like the manner in which they speak to you, kill them all.
I will pass that on to Cleopatra. I'll make sure she gets the message.
All right, I'm back now, guys.
So, Jen, Julius Caesar says Marc Antony can't count past 12.
I mean, Marc Antony is a war elephant. This doesn't surprise me.
I die. I am cracking up.
Should we just refer to him now as Marc Can't Count Past 12 Antony?
I think that this is definitely going to come up again.
I suspect it will. I mean, I don't think finances were his strong suit, considering he was bankrupt before his age of majority and had to just chill out in Athens to get away from his creditors. So, you know.
Wait till you see how things devolve in Parthia. It does make sense. We'll get into this.
But anyway, for Cleopatra, opportunity comes in threes. And for most of us, it does. Because the third time Rome came knocking, in 42 BC, 2 years after Julius Caesar's assassination, only 2 years, it was Marc Antony who showed up by himself. And this time, Cleopatra made the most of the opportunity.
So before we move ahead with what happened there, let's just pause for a minute and take a look at what Antony was up to leading up to this point. Because it's always super amusing to just pause for a minute and see what Marc Antony is doing.
I mean, we know he's vomiting.
Well, we know that. That's just a given. We know he's either completely trashed or has a screaming hangover and he's probably disgorging his stomach contents on something or someone.
And within the last 2 years, he's had another 12 children, but he can't count that many, so it's fine.
Right, and they're all named Antonia.
Or Antonius.
He also named his ships the Antonia. Like, wait till we get to that part.
Because Marc Antony, much like a dog that needs to pee on things to let you know that it now owns it, that is how he owned everything.
It might just be that Marc Antony literally cannot think of a different name.
No, why would you think of a different name when it's the best possible name? Come on, Jenny.
I know, you could literally just name everything Antonia or Antonius and then move on from there. Your cats, your dog, your fish, your goldfish, your children.
Listen, Julius Caesar's password is Venus the Unconquered, and Marc Antony names everything some variation of his name. We figured out the ancient world. Great, we don't need to have this podcast anymore. Bye, guys. Peace out. Season 4, episode 2.
This is it. We're calling it quits on Ancient History Fangirl. We've made it like 18 months or something.
Yep, we're done. There's nothing else in the world we need to cover. We've said it all.
It was always going to come to this point. We figured out everything we need to know. So about a year after Julius Caesar's assassination, in 43 BC, Marc Antony had joined up with Octavian, Caesar's 18-year-old heir, and a third guy named Lepidus, who'd been one of Caesar's right-hand men. The three men formed the Second Triumvirate, an alliance with the goal of seizing power in Rome and punishing anyone who'd taken part in Caesar's assassination. After defeating Cassius and Brutus, the three triumvirs rolled back into Rome and enacted bloody, brutal proscriptions. We tell the whole story of that in Fulvia, Original Gangster of Ancient Rome. If you haven't listened to that, I seriously don't know what you're doing with your life.
Just go right now. You'll be so enriched. And then, you don't have to listen to us talk about it anymore.
Right. Would stop everything and listen to that episode and then come back. We'll be here.
Yeah.
After that, the three triumvirs divided up Rome's territories for themselves. Lepidus got sidelined hard. So hard.
Oh, Lepidus.
He got sidelined so hard that he had a concussion. Octavian went back to Rome to handle land redistribution to the troops and came into epic conflict with Fulvia, who was ruling Rome while Antony was gone. Again, if you haven't listened to Fulvia, original gangster of ancient Rome, I don't even know what to say to you at this point.
I don't either.
You've rendered us both speechless.
You've rendered Julius Caesar speechless. I think he would have been a Fulvia fan.
Julius Caesar, are you a Fulvia fan?
Julius Caesar deeply admires and respects the lady Fulvia. And also banged her.
Really? I think she banged you.
Julius Caesar does not know of what you speak. Banging only goes one way.
That is a deeply Roman sentiment, and that is so untrue.
Yup.
Of course, an ancient Roman would say that. Also, Julius Caesar doesn't do oral, and he thinks it only goes one way. I mean, he did have a magic D. I guess that makes up for a lot.
Again, we don't know that Julius Caesar actually banged Fulvia, but...
Don't trust anything that dude says.
I mean, is he saying it to get even with Antony, who was married to Fulvia? We don't know.
He's been in a surly mood ever since we started this arc.
He's not the main character anymore. Of course he's in a surly mood. And also, his, best friend and his best babe got together, and they're the epic love story. The epic love story isn't Julius Caesar and Cleopatra.
It was, though. He got his time.
But Shakespeare didn't write it that way.
Oh, man, that must grate on him.
Oh, you know it does.
Can we move on? We can, stay on topic.
One thing all the triumvirs had in common at this point was that they all needed money. Desperately, they were broke. They have troops to pay. They'd all made lavish promises to these troops. And both the triumvirs who mattered, Octavian and Antony, were eyeing each other suspiciously, just waiting for the other one to twitch, even slightly toward an attempt at total domination.
I mean, neither one of them was worried about Lepidus, right?
I know, but Lepidus is like, what about me? I might twitch towards total domination.
No, you won't, Lepidus. Sit down. Nobody believes that.
I'm twitching right now. Twitch, twitch, twitch.
Oh my god. Does everyone ignore Lepidus? He's twitching in the corner.
I'm gonna dominate!
Let's just go somewhere else where Lepidus isn't, because he keeps talking about domination.
Oh, hamburgers.
See, this is why nobody takes Lepidus seriously, because of his goofy catchphrases.
Because he's channeling Butters from South Park. Nobody takes Professor Chaos seriously. It's Butters.
Now I'm just gonna picture Butters from South Park as Professor Chaos whenever we talk about Lepidus.
Anyway.
I'm literally crying
Anyway,
right now.
Antony and Octavian had big issues. They were both super concerned with keeping their troops paid and loyal. Antony's job on paper at this point was reorganizing Rome's eastern provinces so that they could be stable and provide Rome with income and generally not cause the empire, or whatever this was at this point. It's not quite the empire yet. It's not the republic.
It's not the consulship of Julius and Caesar anymore.
No, it's the second triumvirate, except really Lepidus is just being Butters in the corner.
So it's really just two guys.
I feel like I want to do an episode on Lepidus now. I feel so bad for him.
We could do a mini-sode on him.
Yeah, let's do a mini-sode on Lepidus.
You know what, Jen? I assign you that task. Your job, should you choose to accept it, is to do a mini-sode on Lepidus.
Aye, aye, Captain.
Do it.
So anyway, it was Antony's job to keep the eastern provinces stable so that they could give Rome some money and not collapse anything any further. This kind of job sounds like a perfect one for a war elephant.
This is a job for Marc Can't Count Past 12 Antony.
But Marc Antony's other motive in touring the eastern provinces was rearranging power structures to his benefit and extorting funds from Asian communities for his troops and for a very expensive plan he had to invade and conquer Parthia. Because nothing ever goes wrong when you visit Parthia, does it, Crassus?
No. Parthia was a kingdom located roughly where northeastern Iran is today. It was a traditional enemy of Rome, and its people were very, very tough. They were horse archers in a volatile region, used to dealing with violent incursions from nomadic tribes and organized kingdoms in all directions. Their territory was a death trap of burning deserts and razorback mountains where unprepared armies went to die. 11 years ago, Rome's richest real estate magnate, Crassus, currently in this episode in severed head form, had tried to invade Parthia and gotten his head handed to him. Literally. We have a bunch of rules, like ancient history fangirl rules to live by, and basically, if you just walk away from this podcast with a single rule, it's don't mess with the Parthians, kids. If we just leave you with one thing,
And if you have a shirt fox, tell someone. And never take a freelance gig from the Carthaginian.
I mean, as a freelancer, I feel passionately about freelance rights, and you should definitely never work for the Carthaginians. They're the worst clients. So those 3 things. And also don't eat the Pontic ducks. They're poison. Okay, so those are 4 things.
But the most important one is the Parthians.
Right, do not mess with the Parthians.
Although maybe the shirt fox is slightly more important.
If you have a shirt fox, I'm serious, tell someone. Don't just leave it in there. So there are reasons why people would want to put a shirt fox in their shirt, and there are reasons why people would want to invade Parthia. And one of the reasons, in fact, the biggest reason, is that Parthia was very rich. And also, because it was so difficult an enemy, it would have brought a lot of glory to whoever defeated it. So Marc Antony knew that if he could defeat Parthia and make it a Roman province under his control, naturally, he'd rename it Antonia.
Or Antonium.
I feel like if Marc Antony was in Scientist, all the elements he discovered would be Antonium. He could, trying to get through this paragraph, he could enrich himself massively if he invaded Parthia, strengthen his army, and get a large public relations boost over Octavian, because that's really what this is about, right? As a war hero and the man who avenged the death of Crassus. All of these things would help him ensure that when Octavian did try to edge him out of power, which was basically inevitable, he wouldn't succeed.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an Enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
An all-new season of The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+.
Mom Talk has just been blowing up.
Whitney and Jen are on Dancing with the Stars.
Taylor is a bachelorette.
Saying that out loud is crazy. Like, that is huge.
But all the cool opportunities could pull us apart.
It's causing issues in everyone's marriage.
My whole world is falling apart right now. It's chaos.
Watch the Hulu original series, The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
So in 42 BC, while Octavian was clashing with Fulvia over troop resettlements in Rome, Cleopatra was presiding over festivals, conducting shady murder experiments, and tossing the dice with regard to Roman alliances. And Lepidus was off doing whatever Lepidus does. Nobody cared. He was definitely General Chaos, the ancient world version of Professor Chaos.
He's over there in his corner muttering to himself.
So Antony embarked on a tour of the eastern provinces to drum up cash and reorganize dynasties. But also, because this was Marc Antony here, his primary purpose in all of this was to have a really good fucking time.
How good a time, Jen?
Oh, let me tell you how good a time he was going to have. He started in Athens, spending the winter there in 42 to 41 BC, because remember, it goes backwards because we're in BC.
We're in the BCs, which means that the smaller the number, the closer we are to present day. Jen felt the need to bring this up in rehearsals.
Guys, I've had a glass of wine, so I have to bring it up again.
Eventually that turns.
Time moves backwards. Jeez.
Severed head of Crassus is really performing well right now.
Half a cup of Falernian and that's it.
I mean, it just pours right out his neck and onto the table.
He just gets drunk on the jaw.
Severed head of Crassus, you are gross. Like, I'm just gonna say it. We're all thinking it.
Anyway, let's continue with the story. So Antony had been to Athens before. He'd studied rhetoric there about 10 years ago, and he'd always liked Athens. Antony spent the winter basically goofing off, adopting Athenian dress, attending plays, competing at sports in the gymnasium, mostly naked.
100% naked.
Definitely naked, because gymnasiums were all naked. Debating with philosophers, and of course...
naked.
Potentially. And of course, he was feasting and drinking on a truly epic scale. And the Greeks humored Antony. They, and all the other rulers in the eastern provinces really, knew that Antony was now a major power in the region. He was there to take money and rearrange dynasties to suit himself, and they had to be on his good side. The people of Athens showered Antony with feasts and gifts, all while tactfully asking for favors and special treatment.
Right, because this is really the game here.
This is totally the game here. Crowds of dancers, musicians, and actors thronged about Antony, eager to entertain him. When Antony left Athens and made his way toward Ephesus, he was preceded by a crowd of men dressed as satyrs with enormous erections, because that's what satyrs had, giant boners,
giant raging agendas,
and women dressed as maenads, the wild, frenzied female worshippers of Dionysus. Everywhere he went, Antony was proclaimed the new Dionysus, and he ate it right up.
I mean, I just love this, Jen. Like, can you just see it? Here comes the new Dionysus, bitches.
You could just see it.
Where are my maenads at?
And the thing about Dionysus, because that's the episode that I did the primary research on, is he literally was thronged by these wild, amazing women and these satyrs with giant erections. And you can see...
Was there limb ripping involved in this?
They didn't always frenzy and rip limbs. I mean, that was sort of reserved for people who didn't, accept Dionysus into their hearts and minds. But when they do frenzy and rip limbs, everyone knows who their god is, and it's Dionysus.
Goddamn straight. Where my maenads at, bitches?
Where my maenads at? I feel like that's just now the motto of my life.
I need to put that on a t-shirt.
I think we will put that on a t-shirt.
Check our merch section. We're going to have that at some point. None of this aggrandizement stopped Antony from enacting crushing levies on all his new provinces. His usual ask was 9 years' worth of taxes to be paid up front in 2 years. And although he was supposed to be spending this money on troops and supplies, Antony often used it to just, pay for his expensive parties and shower his followers with gifts. At one point, bestowing an enormous mansion to a cook who made him a really good dinner. So I have to tell you this one story that just totally ties into Caesar's claim that Marc Antony can't count past 12. One ballsy orator, after Antony levied 200,000 talents, and can we just stop a second, because 20 talents was millions of dollars in today's money if it was talents of gold.
Yeah, we talked about this. We got really bent around the axle on this. We have no idea if it's gold or silver.
And that makes a big difference, so...
It makes a massive difference, but either way, it's a fortune.
Right, an actual talent was supposed to be a human person's weight in money. So 200,000 talents is an unimaginable sum of money, and it just kind of tells me that Marc Antony is making up numbers here.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, I'm just going to charge you a super bajillion talents, and then on top of that, I'm going to charge you another super bajillion talents. And this orator says, that's not actually a real number. Obviously, we don't have that much. And if you never got the first super bajillion talents, take it up with your corrupt administrators, not us. Which is, kind of a mic drop. Antony liked this guy. He was said to love it when people gave it to him straight. So he called off the second super bajillion talent levy. Communities tried other ways to mitigate their Antony problem, too. For instance, everyone knew Marc Antony liked the ladies.
No.
Shocker. He had a lot of big dick energy, okay, Jen?
He did. He had a lot of wives and he had a lot of children.
So many children. And I do feel like his, whole political strategy was, when he was active in the Senate, was just taking it out and swinging it around and hitting people with it.
It all makes sense now.
I mean, what do you think a veto hammer is, Jen? It's all just a euphemism.
I think in Antony's case, it wasn't even that good a euphemism.
I think that's what he called it in bed. Do you want to see my veto hammer?
Oh, yes, Antony.
I mean, if it's Marcellus, it's do you want to see my raging anti-Caesar agenda?
I guess it's better than the horse palace.
So Plutarch has something to contribute to this conversation.
Oh, has he put the flying ointment down?
I doubt it. He tells us that rulers in the eastern provinces frequently offered Marc Antony nights with their wives in order to reduce the levies and get good terms in the redistribution of power. One woman, Glaphyra, was thought to be his mistress during this time. She was competing with another claimant for the throne of Cappadocia. Antony picked the other claimant, which is just deeply disappointing, Antony. She waxed for you. Seriously?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Antony is Antony gonna Antony.
Yeah, he certainly is gonna Antony. Veto hammer gonna veto hammer, okay?
So, putting the veto hammer back in the toga.
Put it back, Antony, put it back!
Just put it back.
Not time for your big dick energy right now.
Put that energy away. Antony basically fucked and drank and partied his way across Asia and Greece, levying enormous payments, drinking the entire open bar, sleeping with other men's wives, and thoroughly living up to his title as the new Dionysus.
Hold up, everyone. Here comes the new Dionysus. Get ready.
Until, in 41 BC, he got to Cilicia,
where there are definitely water slides.
Antony is now settled in with his water slides, hanging out, and he decides that it's time to get serious about preparing for this whole Parthia thing. Not going to call it a war, an invasion, or something I should not be doing. It's a thing.
We're just not putting a label on it, Jen.
He's not calling it Antonia.
That's the only label he puts on things.
So, Antony set himself up in Tarsus, an ancient city along a river in the mountainous region of Cilicia on the southeastern coast of Asia Minor. Then, he sent a message to the ruler of his richest client kingdom, and one that made all the other client kingdoms he'd been extorting look like kids' piggy banks, to come over so that he could inform her that she was now going to be picking up his tab for the Parthian invasion. And that rich client kingdom was Ptolemaic Egypt, and its ruler was Cleopatra.
Antony had kind of a beef with Cleopatra right now, actually. As far as he knew, she'd sent aid to Cassius. She'd also promised, but not delivered, a fleet of ships to him and Octavian. Where were her loyalties exactly? Just what was her deal? Anyway, could she be trusted or not? If Antony didn't think she could be trusted, he was totally willing to rearrange the power structure in her kingdom too, and put someone more trustworthy on the throne. Antony sent a guy named Quintus Dellius to bring Cleopatra the summons. Stacy Schiff, in her amazing book Cleopatra, A Life, which we cannot stop talking about, calls him, quote, a man of acrobatic loyalties. According to her, he, quote, changed sides 3 times in the course of the Civil War, having leapt from Dolabella's camp to Cassius's to touch down temporarily in Marc Antony's. Dellius was there to take Cleopatra's measure, to determine her loyalties, to figure out why she seemed to be half-assed in her support of Caesar's Avengers, and what exactly her deal was already.
So, we don't know what Dellius was expecting. Maybe a grief-stricken queen still moping around about Caesar's death.
Sigh, I mope, I weep.
I shall never have that magic D again.
I shall never see the like.
My fallen angel.
Swoon. So sad, sad swoon. Julius Caesar has got to have a commentary on what we're doing right now.
This is all I can hear. I think he's clapping.
Does he realize we're being sarcastic?
Oh, that's a very rude gesture.
Julius Caesar, you love us, whatever.
So, anyway, we aren't sure exactly what Cleopatra did to make such an impression on him, but we do know that when he met her, he was absolutely 100% not prepared for the reality of Cleo motherfucking Patra. Although she didn't actually fuck her mother, we have to just specify that because, with the Ptolemies, you never know.
Right, with the Ptolemies, you actually do have to specify.
So, Dellius took one look at the Egyptian queen and goddess and new Isis and said, oh, Marc Antony's gonna love you.
And you're gonna love him. Unlike Caesar, he does give oral.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for the right reasons, for the right women. He didn't give it to all his wives.
No, he didn't give it to Octavia, I'll tell you that much.
You know he did to Fulvia.
Oh, he had to do it with Fulvia. If you don't go down on Fulvia, she sends her mobs after you.
I mean, that's what happened with Octavian.
There's a mob outside Fulvia's bedroom, and if they do not hear the appropriate cries of pleasure at the right time, I'm just saying, if Fulvia tells you to go down, you go the fuck down. Otherwise, you might be barricaded in your house for 5 months with an angry mob outside.
And this, kids, is why we'll never be on anyone's college syllabus, like the History of Ancient Greece podcast.
Oh, were we trying to do that? Like, was that a goal?
At one point in time, it might have been. I was like, we'll do a history podcast and we can go for educational funding. And Jenny's like, no, we can't.
I mean, I can already see how that's not going to work.
Anyway, I'm getting back to Dellius.
Right, so let's talk about Dellius.
Delius, the acrobat, once again switched sides. Suddenly, he was Cleopatra's advisor on all things Marc Antony, because he wanted her to succeed. He advised Cleopatra to get ready with a charm offensive and assured her that Antony was, quote, the most agreeable and humane of all commanders.
The most agreeable and humane of commanders. Swoon.
Swoon.
Probably told her about the veto hammer.
He probably did. He's like, let me tell you about Marc Antony's veto hammer.
He's got his good points and his bad points.
He likes to make up numbers.
He has a really weird sense of humor. We're getting to that.
Oh, God.
Cleopatra heard Delius out, and she decided to play it cool. She did not go running to Antony. Nope, she did not. She waited.
Julius Caesar would approve.
Goddamn right. She waited. Not exactly sure how long, maybe weeks, maybe months. The dates are fuzzy. While the letters and summonses from Antony piled up. Some writers suggest she was still judging the situation, but I think she was just trying to pull a boss move here.
Totally. I think she was like, living goddess.
Check.
I'm not traipsing all the way to Cilicia for nothing.
Even if there are water slides.
Even if that water slide goes through a shark tank like the one in Atlantis.
I'm trying to tell you about how Cleopatra did not go to Antony until she was good and ready to go to Antony. And when she was ready, she put on her game face. And she went sailing off to Cilicia to meet Marc Antony in her luxury yacht flotilla like a fucking girl boss. If there was one thing Cleopatra excelled at, it was making an entrance. 6 years ago, she'd appeared before Julius Caesar, dressed simply, sneaking through enemy lines, seizing the initiative, wrapped in burlap, just like he liked his ladies.
Oh, yeah. Wrapped in a itchy fabric and very hot.
Crafty and wrapped in burlap.
Exactly.
For Marc Antony, she took the opposite tack, rowing up the river to Tarsus in a gilded barge with purple sails and silver oars, reclining beneath a canopy, dressed like Venus in a priceless painting. You couldn't possibly miss her. She was fanned by young boys dressed as Eros, the god of erotic love. The most beautiful of her serving maids, as Graces and Nereids, sailed the ship, manning the rudders and trimming the sails. Clouds of expensive incest begot clouds. It sounded like I said incest.
Insects. Really?
Clouds of expensive incest. It is the Ptolemies. I mean,
it was with the most expensive person in the realm.
They didn't always do incest, Jen, but when they did, it was expensive incest. Oh my God. We can't get through this episode. Clouds of expensive incense, not incest and not insects. Incense beguiled the crowds that thronged at the riverbanks to see her.
When Cleopatra's luxury yacht flotilla arrived at Tarsus, Marc Antony was in a large public building hearing petitions. Rumors of Cleopatra's arrival traveled so swiftly and were so disruptive that just about the entire population of Tarsus dropped what they were doing and ran down the docks to catch sight of her, including everyone in the public building who'd been waiting on favors from Antony. You can just see him like, where my mayonnaise at?
Where's everyone going?
Where my mayonnaise at? What's going on?
Am I not the new Dionysus? What?
What?
The veto hammer just got really sad.
So poor Antony's hull quickly began to empty out until he was left all alone in this big echoing place. And eventually he was like, oh, I guess I have to get up and walk somewhere with my body and see what's going on. So he went trailing outside after the crowd, and a message came to him soon after. Quote, Venus has come to revel with Bacchus for the good of Asia.
Swoon! How about that for an opening line?
Oh my God. It's like she just read the Antony playbook and was like, hi, I'm gonna just stroke that veto hammer right now.
It was all sad. Well, that's how you do it. You make it sad and then you make it happy.
Exactly.
Antony invited Cleopatra to join him for dinner, but Cleo pulled another power move and said, oh no, you don't do the inviting, I do the inviting. Antony, being a good sport and all, acquiesced. When night fell, he went down to the riverbank at the appointed time, and what he saw struck him absolutely silent, which I imagine was hard to do. Cleopatra had set up an impromptu banquet hall along the banks of the river. A glittering constellation of lamps had been threaded in the trees above, shining down on 12 separate outdoor banquet halls, separated by luxurious purple tapestries shot through with golden thread. Each hall was furnished with couches, gilded in gold and silver and richly upholstered. Every table groaned with the most sumptuous food and stunning goblets and plates of gold encrusted with priceless gems.
No doubt, Cleopatra was the most astonishing sight of all, dripping with priceless jewelry, resplendent as a goddess. We imagine she gave Antony a self-effacing smile. Oh, this is just some basic thing I threw together at the last minute. You know, I am traveling. This is my fresh off a flotilla face. So according to Appian, as soon as Antony managed to just pick his jaw up off the floor, he immediately brought up his issues with Cleopatra. Why did she send those troops to Cassius? And why didn't she send those promised ships to him and Octavian that one time? Was she with the Caesarians or not? And Cleo answered each of his questions smoothly, with zero apologies. Of course she was a Caesarian. She had borne his son, hadn't she? She came to Rome to help Caesar make Rome the best Rome it could possibly be. I mean, come on. She'd sent her last 4 legions to Dolabella the minute he'd asked, and those troops that went to Cassius had been sent against her orders by a rebellious general. And she'd tried to deliver Antony's ships to him personally, risking her life and limb. The weather just hadn't cooperated. Cleopatra was a gracious host, despite the fact that Antony clearly did not know how to behave or treat a living goddess. So once they'd cleared the air and had that very serious conversation about Cleo's loyalties, Cleo entertained Antony and his friends in high style, sending her guests home with lavish gifts, all of the gem-encrusted jewels, plates, and even the furniture that they've been admiring all night. I mean, can you imagine if any of that was still around?
I have a small apartment in Brooklyn, and this is kind of my nightmare. People sending me home with massive furniture.
Oh, please, give it to me. Oh my God, can you imagine? It's probably like worth more than my flat, which I don't own, but I still imagine it's worth more than.
I bet we could sell it on eBay and make a killing.
I'm not going to sell it on eBay. I'm going to sell it like at Christie's, the auction house.
Or sell it to the Met.
Oh my God, yes.
I don't know where I'm going to put that giant Ptolemaic sofa until I find a buyer for it, but I'll take it.
I mean, we'll figure it out. Your dad has a house in Vermont.
He hates it when I bring stuff up there to store, but I do it a lot. Hi, Dad. He's definitely listening to this right now. Dad, if we ever get a Ptolemaic sofa for the podcast, I'm bringing it up and you're just going to have to deal. I love you.
I mean, if you get a Ptolemaic sofa, like, what an amazing thing.
I know, it's for the podcast, Dad. My dad's a big podcast supporter.
He is.
Lavish generosity, but make no mistake, this was all a power move. Cleopatra knew she was competing with all the other monarchs of the East, who'd been drowning Antony in wine and riches and sex for months and proclaiming him the new Dionysus, which was a nickname that he really, really liked. She had to make the best impression of them all. Before they left, Cleopatra invited her guests back tomorrow, promising she'd, make an effort this time. And the second night, Antony and his lieutenants showed up to a banquet tent knee-deep in rose petals. Stacy Schiff tells us that the perfume must have been overpowering in the heat of Tarsus. And at the end of that night, Cleo sent her guests off with even more lavish gifts. Litters and litter bearers, fabulous horses outfitted in gold trappings, the customary very large furniture and ostentatious plateware that you're going to have to put in your dad's basement or attic until you find a buyer for it, and a single Ethiopian slave each carrying a torch to help her guests get home. And then I guess just live there.
Not cool, Cleo.
Although I guess you could just give the slave his freedom and say, all right, you can go now.
Yeah, maybe they did. Maybe they were like, cool, thanks very much for guiding me home. You're free now. Go enjoy your life. That'd be great. That is the ending that I would like to imagine, but doubt happened.
I don't think that ever happened because it's the ancient world and people were trash.
Yep. So the night after, it was Antony's turn to entertain Cleopatra. Antony was not necessarily a slouch in this area. He was a notorious hedonist whose tastes ran very, very rich. And he just spent the past few months extorting unimaginable wealth out of his provinces. He had the resources and expensive taste to throw a fucking blockbuster party. But did he? Did he?
He should have had this, right?
He did not have this. Maybe he was just hungover, or maybe he was drunk on rose petals. We don't know.
Fermented rose petals.
Antony did not have this. Because here's the thing. Never try to out-Ptolemy a Ptolemy when it comes to hosting a dinner party. When Cleopatra arrived at Antony's dinner, she was less than impressed. And Antony busted out the self-deprecating humor. He was, as Plutarch emerges from his fever dream to assure us, quote, first to rail at the meagerness and rusticity of his own arrangements. Cleopatra immediately joined in making fun of him, quote, without restraint and boldly.
As she'd done with Caesar, Cleopatra gauged her audience and adjusted her charm offensive accordingly. Plutarch tells us that Cleopatra noticed Antony's rough, ribald, soldierly humor, decidedly more down-to-earth than Caesar, and adopted a similar, informal, and even ribald humor herself. Cleopatra turned on a dime to transform herself from the sophisticated, wealthy intellectual queen and goddess into the quintessential cool girl, just one of the guys, a woman who could arm wrestle, crack dirty jokes, and play pranks with the best of them. No doubt the minute she started doing this, it was her entourage's turn to pick their jaws up off the floor. Marc Antony, simple soul that he was, didn't stand a chance.
Appian tells us that Antony was, quote, amazed at Cleopatra's wit as well as her good looks, and became her captive even though he was 40 years of age. At this point in time, Cleopatra was 28, so 40-year-old guy going for a woman over a decade younger than him. This never happens.
Appian, why are you so surprised?
Can't imagine what he sees in her, although, let's be honest, she's almost age appropriate.
For the ancient world, she really is age appropriate.
Antony stuck around Tarsus with Cleopatra for a couple more weeks. And in that time, he completely lost interest in, plundering the eastern provinces or fucking his way across Asia. Instead, he took up a new hobby, having people killed on Cleopatra's behalf. It's almost like in her bujo, she had a list.
Well, much like the triumvirs and Sulla, she had a list.
Cleopatra still had a couple of loose ends floating around. One of those was Arsinoe, her sister. Arsinoe was a few years younger than Cleopatra. About 6 years ago, when civil war erupted in Egypt between Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy XIII in 47 BC, Arsinoe had deserted Cleopatra and tried to seize the crown of Egypt for herself. She'd lost. She was facing Julius fucking Caesar after all, and she definitely made him break out in a sweat. And she was a 15-year-old girl, so, that was pretty badass. But the thing is, she still lost. Caesar hauled Arsinoe back to Rome, forced her to walk in a triumph, in chains, behind a burning replica of the lighthouse at Pharos. And then, at the request of the Roman public, which sympathized with Arsinoe, spared her life, sending her to live at the Temple of Ephesus in Greece.
But Arsinoe hadn't gone quietly into obscurity. She spent the next 6 years plotting against Cleopatra, even getting the priests in the temple and a few other allies to declare her the real queen of Egypt, which is just fighting words. At Cleopatra's request, Antony sent soldiers to haul Arsinoe out of her temple and murder her on the temple steps. Other people Antony had murdered included that disobeying general who'd sent Cleopatra's troops to Cassius. He was just asking for it too.
Totally.
And someone wandering around Asia claiming to be Ptolemy XIII. And the funny thing is, he might actually have been, because theoretically, Ptolemy XIII had drowned in the Nile at the end of the Alexandrian War, but his body had never been found, so there was kind of an opening there.
But if that was me, I probably wouldn't be telling people. I wouldn't be advertising until I had a real good army at my side.
That's true, so maybe not.
It's obvious that sparks flew the moment Antony and Cleopatra met under the lights in the trees at the lavish banquet in Tarsus. But it's actually possible Antony and Cleopatra had met before. Antony worked closely with Julius Caesar, and they could have met while Cleopatra was visiting Rome in 45 and 44 BC. Appian tells us that Antony had in fact fallen in love with Cleopatra at first sight about 14 years ago, when she was about 14 years old, because that makes sense. It's the fucking ancient world. Ugh.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Antony had been serving under Gabinius then, and he'd helped to put her dad, Aletes, the flute monster, back on the Egyptian throne. And we talk about that in Cleopatra in The King of Rome.
So was this a love match, Jen, or was this a hard-headed political union?
It's a tough one. I feel like for Antony, the veto hammer swings one way.
For Marc Antony, he's clearly lost his head. And I think Cleopatra's clearly being very calculating, at least at first.
Absolutely. Did she maybe grow to love him? Possibly.
Yeah, I think that it's not necessarily mutually exclusive, but these two needed each other. Antony needed Cleopatra's money and support, possibly even more than Caesar had all those years ago, and Cleopatra definitely needed another Roman protector.
Well, I think definitely more than Caesar had, because we talk about Marc Antony a lot, and got a lot of sympathy for Marc Antony, but I do think he was Caesar's hammer. He was Caesar's war elephant. And he was great when you put him in a direction and he had to go in that direction. I don't think he had the best strategy, which was what Caesar was excellent at. And, he was a great right-hand man, second in charge. And I think being like the number one guy, he's not great at it. He shows us time and again that is not his forte.
Having Cleopatra by his side gives him a good strategist. So there's that. She can be a stabilizing force for him.
Absolutely.
Marc Antony and Caesar had some key things in common that likely appealed to Cleopatra, besides the fact that they were both powerful Romans who could support her rule. Like Caesar, Antony was sexually voracious and known for his preference for strong, intelligent women. He's got that big dick energy. Everybody knows it. Like Caesar, he specialized in seducing the world's elite, sophisticated women, the wives of Roman senators and client kings. But the reason those women liked these two men was probably very different. Caesar was urbane and sophisticated and brilliant, and Antony was down to earth and fun. Antony didn't have Caesar's intellect. No doubt Cleo connected more with Caesar on that level, but Antony was definitely a babe. Stacy Schiff describes him as, quote, curly-haired and square-jawed, a chiseled, broad-shouldered paragon of rude health. Swoon over here. That had to appeal to Cleopatra.
Julius Caesar would like to say...
Oh, Julius Caesar's here! Hi, Julius Caesar.
Hello. Julius Caesar would like to remind you that Antony is a scoundrel. He's the type of deplorable friend who, the moment you are assassinated brutally by those who you've pardoned, decides to make it with your best girl.
So are you saying that Marc Antony is just a spectacular disappointment in all ways?
There was a time when I would have considered him not a spectacular disappointment, but I am glad that I left everything to Octavian.
Oh, are you? Considering how it turned out?
Considering what Antony does next, yes.
Well, what about with Cleopatra and what happens to her?
Cleopatra had to do what Cleopatra had to do to survive.
Do you think I hit it on the nose, the difference between the two of you?
I need to go for a bit and compose some poetry. I shall see you when I feel ready to speak about this matter again.
I know that this is a difficult subject, so, you might want to just, like my dad with the war elephants, you might want to just go make yourself some tea, put some whiskey in the tea, drink the tea, and then turn it back on when you're done.
I think I'll go watch the Battle of Winterfell again and scream at my television.
There's other shows on HBO that are pretty good. You should try one of those.
He's gone. Anyway, Cleopatra and Antony had a lot in common. Both had extreme tendencies for self-aggrandizement, shocker, styling themselves as divinities on Earth, Cleo as the new Isis and Antony as the new Dionysus. Both adored luxury and excess. Also, both had loved Caesar, fought battles with him, and known him just about as well as anyone in the world. And both have been absolutely screwed in his will. So after a few weeks, Cleopatra returned to Alexandria, and by winter, as soon as he possibly could, even though Rome was in shambles, there was still more blood to squeeze from the eastern provinces, and the Parthians were looming threateningly in the distance. Antony followed her.
So that's it for this week. Join us in 2 weeks for the next installment and for whatever Julius Caesar whips up in the realm of poetry.
Remember, the pirates almost threw him overboard for his poetry. I wouldn't expect much.
You know what? I think somebody who was contemporaneous of Caesar said the best thing about Caesar's poetry was that none of it had survived. And in the meantime, connect with us on social at Ancient Hist Fan on Twitter or Ancient History Fangirl on Facebook and Instagram.
If you want more of us, in the meantime, we have a Patreon where we now have several minisodes up. These are shorter episodes between 10 and 30 minutes. I mean, 30 minutes isn't that short, but it's shorter than our normal ones.
We just have a hard time being brief.
We do. And these episodes deal with things that we didn't get to cover in our longer episodes. Starting at just $2 a month. I can not even get a cup of coffee for that. So for just $2 a month, you can subscribe and get more episodes from us in your feed. And you can subscribe at patreon.com/Ancient History Fangirl.
Right now, we have minisodes up on how Pompey cleared up the Mediterranean pirate problem in roughly 40 days, a story about an infamous pirate queen who lived a few centuries before Pompey, and Jen invited Julius Caesar back onto the podcast because he keeps bugging us to let him come back on the podcast to critique the Battle of Winterfell from Game of Thrones.
I did. It was fun.
It was great, actually. That is a fun episode. If you ever asked yourself how Julius Caesar might fight an army of the undead, that's the episode to listen to.
And you can only get it if you're on Patreon. So we have some Patreon members to call out this week, by the way, and they include C.R. Brandon,
Shayna Bazik, and we apologize for any mispronunciation of names that might happen, because it definitely will, and we're sorry.
Rick Peavy,
Rebecca Schmalholtz,
Hannah G,
Jennifer Schellenberg.
That's my sister-in-law.
Oh, hi, Jen's sister-in-law.
And Chandra. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. We vastly appreciate all the help you can give us to keep our podcast running. Subscribing to our Patreon is a great way to support us and one we really appreciate.
But if you aren't ready to subscribe to something on a monthly basis, that's okay. We understand. You can also give to our Ko-Fi fund. The link is on the homepage to our website, ancienthistoryfangirl.com. And you can kick us a few bucks there, enough to buy a coffee or a cocktail or who knows, maybe some research books. And we're thinking about putting up our reading lists. If you want to help us to pick up books that we need for future episodes, let us know if that's something you'd be interested in doing, and we'll set up some reading lists.
And if you're not in a place to give money, we totally understand that too. Leave us a review. We really appreciate those too. They really give us a morale boost, and they also help us in the algorithms. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love.
You invite her to dinner. She takes it as an opening salvo. Her reply is a silken command, wrapped in a request. You pick up the subtext at once. You don't send the invitations. I do. You've always rather liked a challenge. It's evening when you go down to the riverbank, accompanied by your friends and lieutenants. What you see makes you all fall silent. Somehow, Cleopatra has brought the constellations down from the sky to alight in the trees. They flicker and sparkle, the branches shivering in the breeze from the river. The line of tents glows before you like silken lanterns, luminous lungs. Inside the tent, the air is sultry. A banquet has been laid out fit for the gods, foods you could not name, glowing like gems in the firelight. There is nothing here not gilded in silver or gold, or upholstered in vivid reds and purples, shot through with gold thread. You've never seen dye so expensive, deep enough to drown in. But of all the wonders here, it's the woman you can't take your eyes from. She rises from her couch when you enter, dressed in silken white, adorned with silver and fiery amethysts, a ring on every finger. She glides forward to meet you. You've seen her before, but always from afar, always dazzling and distant and Caesar's. Up close, she is almost overwhelming. Shining black hair and eyes deep as memory. Marc Antony, she says, and you raise her hand to your lips, breathless. You're late. You had words for this woman, something about alliances, promised troops that never arrived, but suddenly none of it matters. You've spent months wearing the trappings of a god, but now here you stand before the real thing. You've never felt more mortal. Nothing to say? A dark brow arches. Very well, I forgive you. A small, secretive smile, and you feel yourself falling, all at once and violently. The tent walls tremble around you. The world is steady beneath your feet. You don't know yet where this will lead you. You don't know yet it will lead you to years sunk in wine and revelry, to passion hotter than the sands of Parthia, to betrayal and reunion and 3 brave children, and then, finally, to your own bad end. You don't know that yet, but you stand before her and you think, I'd go to war for her. I would. The silence hangs between you, hot and sultry as an Alexandrian dawn. Come, her smile widens. Let Bacchus and Venus revel together for the good of Asia. She takes your hand and you follow her, and not for a minute, not in all the years to come, do you regret it. I'm the new Isis.
And I'm the new Dionysus.
And this is Ancient History Fangirl. In our last episode, Marc Antony met Cleopatra on the banks of the river Tarsus. Marc Antony forgot his agenda of wringing every last penny out of his eastern provinces while rearranging dynasties to suit his political benefit and sleeping with client kings' wives, and devoted himself full-time to feasting and drinking with Cleopatra. It was a magical whirlwind romance, and when Cleopatra went home to Alexandria, Antony forgot about restructuring the eastern provinces, preparing for the war in Parthia, or shoring up his power in Rome. He filed all that under "this can wait" and followed Cleopatra to Alexandria.
Marc Antony arrived in Egypt in November of 41 BC, and Cleopatra gave him a very, very warm welcome. If he'd thought the feasting, drinking, and partying were incredible in Tarsus, what greeted him in Alexandria put those revelries to shame. The people of Greece and Asia had proclaimed Marc Antony the new Dionysus, and Cleopatra made it her business to treat him as if he was the god of wine and revelry in the flesh. Julius Caesar would like to reiterate that Antony is a fucking scoundrel.
Thanks, Julius Caesar.
My heart is deeply broken.
Are we going to get the poetry now or later?
If I let you listen to the incredible works of my heart, will you promise not to laugh like the pirates?
I promise nothing.
Then I can give you no poetry.
You open yourself to ridicule when you come on this podcast. That's always been the deal.
You can't handle the greatness and depths of my heart.
So Julius Caesar is upset enough to have dropped the third person, I noticed.
They thought stabbing me 40 times would be enough, but no. It was this, the final blow.
All right, we're gonna move on.
I thought you ladies were my friends.
We're moving on. This isn't about you, Caesar.
Moving on. Antony and Cleopatra founded a club they called the Imitable Livers.
It's the inimitable livers.
Inimitable livers.
Inimitable.
I can't pronounce this.
Every time this comes up, we struggle with it. Inimitable.
This is going to be my rowboats for the ages.
It's a club to spank your liver.
Poor livers. They do so much for us. Anyway, this was an extremely expensive drinking club. So every day they threw lavish feasts for each other, as you do, each of them trying to top the other in their outrageous expenditures.
There's a fun story that comes to us from these unforgettable banquets. Pliny the Elder tells us that Cleopatra made a bet with Marc Antony that she could throw the most expensive dinner ever thrown in the history of the world. Cleopatra, according to Pliny, owned the 2 largest pearls in the known world. They'd been left to her by other client kings from realms in Asia. Pliny says, quote, "When Antony was stuffing himself daily with rare foods, she proudly and impertinently," and this is Pliny clearly has a raging agenda here. I'm just going to tell you what he says. She, quote, "proudly and impertinently, like the royal harlot that she was."
Oh, fuck you, Pliny.
Pliny's enjoying himself imagining the royal harlot right now.
Slut-shaming Cleopatra. What a dick move, Pliny.
Dick move, but you know you want that. You just can't touch it, and that's why you're mad. Sneered at his attempts at luxury and extravagance. When he asked her what could be added in the way of sumptuousness, she replied that she would use up 10 million sesterces at one dinner. And I've seen the amount this was really worth, estimated at anywhere from $500,000 to $28 million in today's money. And I'm definitely going to lean toward the bigger number here because it's just more fun. I kind of think Marc Antony wouldn't know the difference anyway, though, because he can't count past 12.
There's literally no proof except Caesar told us.
I actually, given what we know about Marc Antony, I believe him there. Marc Antony's eyes got round as saucers at that figure because it sounded awfully big, but he didn't know really how much that was. And he said, "I don't actually think it's humanly possible to spend that much on one dinner, Cleo." And Cleopatra said, "Challenge accepted." So the two made a bet.
The next night, Cleopatra threw Marc Antony a lavish dinner. And of course, it was utterly magnificent, as you would expect. But Marc Antony had been hanging out with Cleopatra for a while now, and this was just a basic Tuesday for her. It wasn't like more lavish than the lavish dinner party they had last week. So like, come on, Cleo.
Right. Geez, Cleo, this is just Tuesday at this point.
This is Tuesday. My liver isn't even punished at this point.
It's still looking kind of perky for a typical Tuesday.
Marc Antony leaned back in his chair and laughed and said, "Looks like you lost this one, babe." Cleopatra said, "Just you wait, motherfucker." Cleopatra told him she would consume the multi-million-dollar portion of the evening all by herself. She called for dessert, and her servants brought her only one dish, full of vinegar. Cleopatra took one pearl out of her ear, the massive, beautiful pearl renowned throughout the world, and dropped it into the vinegar, where it dissolved into slush. She then drank it down. Their mutual friend, Lucius Plancus, had to stop her as she went to dissolve the other pearl. ball. Everyone laughed as Cleopatra was declared the winner. So that was how one of these banquets went down, with lavish expenditures, drinking and food, and lots of teasing and flirting and extravagant bets.
It's just one more night with the inimitable livers.
I just can't see Julius Caesar and Cleopatra behaving that way.
They did have a lot of lavish banquets after the Alexandrian War, so maybe.
Not like that, though. That's just, like, so excessive.
Do you think Marc Antony just encouraged Cleopatra's, like, most excessive side?
I think so. And I think it was sort of like... Marc Antony, I feel like probably had the attention span of like a mayfly. So it was just like, I have to kind of like keep him engaged. I guess this is what I'm going to do. Whereas like Julius Caesar was like, I have to keep him engaged with my intellect and wit and the things I know.
It's two different challenges, you know, because with Antony, you have to keep topping yourself to keep him interested, right?
Totally.
Plutarch tells us a story that was passed down to him from his grandfather, who claimed he knew a guy who was a cook in Cleopatra's kitchens. According to Plutarch, the cook invited his grandfather's friend to see the preparations for one of Cleopatra's famous suppers. The friend was amazed at what he saw. In addition to vast amounts of other dishes in stupendous qualities, 8 whole wild boars were roasting in the kitchen's immense fireplaces. The friend turned to the cook and said something like, "Wow, must be a huge party." And the cook replied that actually no, it was only about 12 people, but nobody knew when Marc Antony might be hungry. Quote, "For it might happen that Antony would ask for supper immediately, and after a little while perhaps would postpone it and call for a cup of wine or engage in conversation with someone. So not one, but many suppers are arranged, for the precise time is hard to hit."
Think of the waste.
Oh, there's a lot of waste here.
There's just so much waste. And also the amount of labor the people have to do so that you can just call for food whenever you want it. And it's not as if like we can be sure they were getting paid for their labor, because they probably weren't.
Yeah, some of these people were slaves. I don't know what the ratio to slaves versus like paid people were working in Cleopatra's kitchens, but many of the people in there were slaves.
Exactly. So,
I totally agree.
So Cleopatra pulled out all the stops to keep Mark, I have the attention span of mayfly, Antony, entertained and interested. Plutarch says she was constantly, quote, contributing some fresh delight and charm to Antony's hours of seriousness or mirth, kept him in constant tutelage, and released him neither night nor day. She played at dice with him, drank with him, hunted with him, and watched him as he exercised himself in arms.
Probably naked.
I think, let's be honest, he was just hefting his wine goblet at this point in time. Let's be clear. Cleopatra was working overtime here to completely stage manage this relationship. She basically made Marc Antony her full-time job, in addition to, you know, her other full-time job, which was not a side hustle by any stretch of the means, which was ruling her country, you know, the most expensive client kingdom that Rome had.
Yeah, the biggest, most complicated, most richest, expensive client kingdom in the Roman Empire.
Which wasn't quite an empire yet, but we don't know what to call it.
Roman Empire / consulship of Octavian and Antony something something.
And Lepidus, General Chaos.
Oh, right. Lepidus. I forgot about Lepidus, like everyone does.
How could you forget about General Chaos?
And I have to stop here and pull out another comparison between Caesar's time in Alexandria and Marc Antony's. If you'll remember from the Cleopatra episodes in our Caesar arc, Julius Caesar rolled into Alexandria in 47 BC, so about 6 years ago, I think, with his red cloak and his crowd of lictors flashing his eagles everywhere, and immediately antagonized the Alexandrian mob. He then spent the next 10 months barricaded in the palace, fighting a brutal urban war against a populace that absolutely loathed and despised him and wanted to rip his limbs off. 6 years later, Marc Antony showed up wearing Greek clothes and none of the trappings of Roman power. And while Caesar couldn't walk down a street in Alexandria to just stop at the bodega and get a cup of coffee without attracting an angry mob who wanted him dead, Marc Antony loved going out in the streets and mingling with the people. Of course, Marc Antony did go around going to plays, attending lectures, drinking and carousing. He even visited the tomb of Alexander the Great, which was a popular tourist attraction in Alexandria. But one of Marc Antony's favorite things to do was go out at night in Alexandria with his friends, dressed as commoners. He'd lurk around the windows of people's houses, peering in and making fun of people. He thought that this was hilarious.
I mean, that is being a peeping Tom and kind of perverted.
Could you just imagine just sitting down to dinner at like your dinner table and all of a sudden there's Marc Antony at your window?
I live on the American third floor or the British second floor. And when we have double-decker buses that go by, I'm always like, can they look in? Can they see what I'm doing? Maybe I should close the blinds. Now every time I'm going to think, is Marc Antony looking at me from the top of that double-decker bus?
He might be just looking at, pointing and laughing and like making fun of you to his friends. It's like, what are you laughing at, Marc Antony?
It's the last time I do yoga without closing the blinds.
So Cleopatra joined in dressed as a serving maid and spying and joking and making fun right along with him. So it might not just be Marc Antony, let's be clear, spying on you. It might be Cleopatra and Marc Antony.
Cleopatra, do better. This is a terrible thing to do to other people.
And you're supposed to act like you don't recognize them. That's the other thing about it. That's part of the game.
Oh, yeah. I don't recognize the new Dionysus and Isis. They're not blinding me with all their bling.
Marc Antony's, disguise ideas are not sophisticated, I imagine. Like, he thinks that if he just wears, like, normal people clothes, that people won't realize it's him.
So the Alexandrians adored Peeping Tom Marc Antony. He would go out and party and carouse until dawn. He usually came back beat up because he's looking in your windows, weirdo. But Antony loved this shit.
I can't quite wrap my head around his sense of humor. I just don't really get it.
I don't think anyone does. Anyway, he loved thinking he'd fooled people into believing he was just a regular guy. I mean, he hadn't.
Everyone knew it was him.
There are many reasons why they knew it was him, Jenny. Do you want me to tell you why?
Why? Why did they know it was him?
Because he had stamped across his forehead, if lost, returned to Cleopatra at the palace. He also had tattooed on his hand, left and right.
So he could tell which hand it was?
I mean, he didn't really, but maybe.
We can't prove that he didn't, so maybe he did. Think about it. Consider it.
Getting back to our story, everyone humored Marc Antony and pretended not to recognize this tall peeping Tom with curly hair. The Alexandrians let Marc Antony wander among them relatively unharmed and even tolerated his insults. I mean, why, Mark?
Because this is what he thought was funny, and I'm having a hard time with it.
He has the worst sense of humor.
Such a bad sense of humor. Marc Antony, what are you doing?
Whereas the Alexandrians were inclined to rip most Romans limb from limb. They cuffed Antony about the ears and gave him a friendly beating and sent him home with all his limbs attached because it did say, please return to Cleopatra. I need all of the bits, especially his veto hammer.
Right. That needs to be in place. Please don't take that off.
Plutarch says that they used to say that Antony, quote, used the tragic mask with the Romans, but the comic one with them. But wandering around the streets and pretending to be regular folks wasn't the only hijinks that Cleopatra and Antony got up to. We're going to give you one more story about the pranks they used to play on each other.
So this one time...
This one time at band camp?
This one time at band camp, Cleopatra took Antony fishing on the Nile, and he absolutely sucked at it. Antony sucks at fishing. Meanwhile, Cleopatra, of course, was killing it, reeling in fish after fish and making it look easy and not even breaking a sweat and just looking fabulous and killing it at fishing.
Just being a living goddess on earth, you know.
Right. Meanwhile, Marc Antony just could not even catch a minnow. I mean, if you painted this guy in pig's blood and pushed him over the side, he wouldn't catch an alligator. Like, it was that bad. It was emasculating and humiliating, and Antony was sucking at something in front of Cleopatra, so that was a little embarrassing.
Julius Caesar would like to remind Antony that he's a cad. You cad. Dick face.
Thank you for that contribution, Julius Caesar.
That's not a good contribution, Julius Caesar. Do better.
I know. Can we have some ancient world insight? Are you just going to be like muttering in the corner like Professor Chaos?
Like Lepidus.
This is Julius Caesar is in the corner muttering to himself, and occasionally he bursts in.
Julius Caesar would like to remind everyone that Antony was his number 2, and you all know what that means.
Well, whose fault is that? You picked him, buddy.
Yeah, but he's still a giant poo.
I recall in the first episode that you ever showed yourself in, Julius Caesar, I was sarcastic and you told me I had to elevate my game.
Sarcasm is the lowest form of wit, Jenny Williams, and you can do better. Marc Antony cannot.
I disagree. I think scatological humor is the lowest form of wit, and I think you need to elevate your game right now or you don't get to be on the podcast. That's what I think.
Do you think this is something I need to do with my time?
It must be, otherwise you keep showing up.
Well, now you're going to piss him off and we won't get to hear his poetry. We won't get to hear it till the last episode.
So I was trying to tell this story before we were derailed by Julius Caesar,
who has resorted to poo jokes.
So Marc Antony took someone in his retinue aside and ordered this guy to take some fresh fish and dive down under the boat and fasten them onto his hooks so it looked like he'd caught them himself. So Antony's luck changed and he suddenly started reeling in fish after fish like a boss and getting back his big dick energy. And Cleopatra was duly impressed. She praised his skill loudly and at length. Oh, Antony, you're so good at this. Yeah.
Look at the scales on that one.
Oh, man, you're just pulling in all of these big, muscular, sinuous fish.
We could feed like a whole 3 people at one of our banquets.
Probably just going to eat bites of it ourselves and then throw it away, because that's how we roll.
That's how we roll with excess.
Oh, Marc Antony with your fishing skills.
Stop.
Then at dinner that night, she regaled all their mutual friends with stories of his fishing prowess. Oh my God, you guys, you should have seen how good Marc Antony was at fishing.
You should have seen how well he worked that rod, guys.
The fishes were so big.
When he stuck his rod out, they just jumped onto the boat.
Yeah, all he had to do was wave it around a little, and like all of a sudden, boom! It's like Fishapalooza in there. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm sorry.
No, you don't. I'll try and keep us from being too disgusting.
Oh, is that your job, Miss Horse Phallus?
I don't know where the fuck that came from.
You think you're the voice of reason in this podcast for some reason, but you're not?
No, after Kukal and I realized I was not going to be the voice of reason.
It's like Marc Antony and Fulvia up in here. Like, nobody's going to rein anybody in. There's no normalizing factor.
There is not. So you got to finish the sentence, babe.
So she urged all of their friends to come fishing the next day so they could see how Marc Antony worked his rod.
So now Marc Antony had to repeat his trick again because he hasn't magically overnight actually learned how to fish.
Oh no, make no mistake.
Exactly. But this time, Cleopatra took aside some servants of her own. She ordered them to swim below the boat and attach salted herring to Marc Antony's hook. Marc Antony reeled in the salted preserved fish to uproarious laughter from all their friends, the crew, and everyone. All of Alexandria is just laughing.
Oh God, he was so busted.
So busted. And then Cleopatra turned to Antony and said, and we're paraphrasing from Plutarch here, leave the fishing to the locals, babe. Your sport is the hunting of cities, realms, and continents. I mean, well played, Cleopatra. You turned that biting, cutting joke into another way to make Antony feel good about himself.
I mean, I think that's basically how she did it with him. She tore him down and then built him back up.
And probably what she needed to do to keep his raging agenda in check.
Well, it's how to keep him interested, just make him feel super bad about himself and then make him feel super good about himself so it feels even better when it happens.
Julius Caesar was an excellent fisherman.
Oh, was he?
I was. I did not need anyone to put any fish on my line. And please, Marc Antony, if you're going to repeat a trick like that, make sure that you bribe both sets of servants so you don't wind up with salted herring on your face.
Oh, man, I see how you did it, Julius Caesar. I'm on to you. So that was the kind of time Marc Antony was having in Alexandria. He lingered there for probably about 5 or 6 months, but the world didn't stop while he was away. The Parthians were getting feisty. They invaded Syria and killed the governor he'd installed there, and things had devolved spectacularly in Rome to the point where his fellow triumvir, Octavian, was now at war with his wife, Fulvia. So while Marc Antony was inimitably living it up in Alexandria and destroying his liver, he was married. We talk about his wife Fulvia at length in the Fulvia episode, Fulvia, original gangster of ancient Rome, which if you haven't listened to it, question your life, question your choices, question everything. The thumbnail version of that is that Fulvia was a badass woman who led the powerful street gangs.
She was a Dux Femina, people.
She and Antony had been married for about 5 or 6 years now, and she'd proven a devoted, loyal ally who worked tirelessly for Antony's benefit while he was busy working his rod in the Nile.
So Octavian was the grandnephew of Julius Caesar. He'd been named Caesar's heir at 18. He's about 22 at this point in the story. But Antony had been Caesar's right-hand man, his number 2, as Caesar told us, for his entire career. And both men saw themselves as the natural heirs to Caesar's legacy. They were bitter rivals, forced for the moment to cooperate. But the second triumvirate could only last for so long. Poor Lepidus, general chaos in the corner.
Poor Lepidus. this. You just want to give him a little scratch behind the ears.
You do. So, like we said in the last episode, when Antony and Octavian defeated the last of Caesar's assassins, they divided up the empire between them. Antony got the eastern provinces, and he immediately set out for those, intent on drumming up cash to support his planned invasion of Parthia and drinking and fucking his way across a continent. And from there, he'd sent for Cleopatra to pick up the bulk of the tab. He'd left his wife, Fulvia, in charge of Rome while he was gone.
Meanwhile, Octavian had returned to Rome to distribute land grants to the soldiers who'd fought for them. But Fulvia hadn't liked how he did it by taking land from the common people to give to the soldiers, and she kind of had a point there. And she also hadn't liked the idea of Octavian getting all the credit for giving land grants to the soldiers because it meant that when push came to shove, which it would eventually, these soldiers would be more loyal to Octavian than Antony and would probably side with him in a civil war. Things escalated quickly, and soon Fulvia and Octavian were at war. And this was bad news for Antony, who hadn't quite built up his power base strongly enough to challenge Octavian yet. See, that's what he was doing in Alexandria. He was building up his power base.
He was all about the base.
He was all about that base. The whole point of Parthia was to help him build up his strength to do that. A victory in Parthia would bring him the money, prestige, and battle-tested loyal army he needed to guarantee a win against Octavian. But Fulvia had forced his hand.
So, sometime, probably in the spring of 40 BC, Antony pried himself away from Cleopatra and sailed to Athens, where Fulvia had taken refuge after Octavian defeated her army. The two had an epic fight. We're not quite sure what Antony said to Fulvia, but what we know is that not long after he left, she fell into a deep depression and died. Now, I call bullshit on that.
This is what the ancient sources say.
Sure, the ancient sources would say that, because in the end, Fulvia is a woman, and women have to die of heartbreak because they can't be Dux Femina, because that is unnatural. I suspect what really happened here is she was forced to commit suicide, or she was just murdered.
You know, there is actually a branch of scholarship that suspects that she might have been murdered or poisoned by Octavian, because the death is awfully convenient.
It's super convenient. It makes Marc Antony single, and that helps him sort out his alliance with Octavian. And also, I just don't think Fulvia, who ran the street gangs, who raised an army in Antony's name, who fought a war, would sink into a deep depression and die.
It's a little bit hard to stomach that after she's been so strong in the rest of her life.
Yeah, and that's not to say that people don't sink into depressions and that they don't waste away from grief and things like that. It does happen. I just don't feel like that is necessarily what happened here.
It doesn't sound like her, but I will say that, like, if you take it one way and say that maybe she really loved Marc Antony and maybe everything she was doing she did for him, and maybe whatever he said to her he wasn't thinking and he was just a war elephant saying really mean things, and maybe it left her suicidal. Like, she was someone who went all out, and maybe she went all out in this too.
Fulvia stopped being a part of the male story, so of course she must have wasted away and died.
But I will say that I think your instinct that this doesn't sound like her is one that definitely other people have had before too, and that's why there's like a theory that says that, gosh, her death looked awfully convenient, and follow the smoking gun on that one.
Totally. Antony's relationship with Fulvia had been a love match. He'd thrown off his long-term love affair with a glamorous actress, Cythera, to marry Fulvia. They'd had 2 sons together, probably both named Antonius.
Actually, I think they were both named Antonius.
Of course they were.
I'm not even joking.
And over the course of Julius Caesar's civil war, dictatorship, and subsequent assassination, these two had dominated Roman politics and the streets, leading gang wars and forcing their agenda through the Senate, and setting off a terrifying round of proscriptions that left most of their enemies in Rome dead.
For roughly 2 years, Fulvia and Antony ruled all levels of Roman society, from the streets to the Senate, 2 ultra-violent, frenzying war elephants who excelled at pouring gasoline on fires. They'd had, in other words, a really good run. But now Fulvia was dead, and whatever Antony's last words to her were, they had probably been devastating to this woman who'd fought for so long and so hard on his behalf. Maybe the argument had even caused her death. Maybe she'd just been poisoned by Octavian. We don't know. Appian tells us that Fulvia started her war with Octavian to draw Antony away from Cleopatra and back to her side. I mean, I don't know. I think she already had plenty of other reasons to go to war with Octavian, and we get the sense that Octavian had the kind of face that made people want to declare war against him.
And I also think it's kind of belittling to say that the only reason to start this war was because Antony wasn't at her side. The real reason to start this war was, unlike Antony fucking about in Alexandria, Fulvia's like, if Octavian resettles all the troops, you're going to lose everything you have with these men.
Right. I mean, I think she really had her finger on the pulse of what people were thinking on the streets and in the military camps. And I think she was, dealing with that reality in a way that Antony had just pissed off and decided not to deal with because privilege.
Absolutely. Appian also tells us that Antony was pretty broken up about Fulvia's death and blamed himself for it. But even so, he repudiated her actions to Octavian, put all of the blame on her for instigating this war, and reswore his friendship and loyalty to Octavian, for the time being. And just to show he meant it, Marc Antony agreed to marry again to Octavian's sister, Octavia. I mean, creative names, guys.
We haven't gone into Roman nomenclature and how it worked, but it actually might be kind of an interesting little side note.
Yeah, maybe it's a mini-sode, Jenny.
Maybe so.
So here's where Octavia comes into the story. Octavia was Octavian's older sister, his half-sister actually. She was 6 years older than him, and the two were very close. Plutarch describes her as beautiful, intelligent, and dignified, where Fulvia was a fierce war leader who commanded street gangs and armies, and Cleopatra was a captivating seductress, ruler and goddess on earth who spoke 9 languages. Octavia was a perfect, unassailable model of Roman womanhood, or at least that's how she's described. Plutarch called her, quote, a wonder of a woman.
She'd been married before at the age of 15 to a senator named Marcellus, who was 34 at the time. Yeah. Ugh. Marcellus, if you'll remember from Julius Caesar and the Point of No Return, was a senator with a raging anti-Caesar agenda who'd tried to have Caesar recalled from Gaul in the middle of the Gallic War. Interestingly, Marcellus and Octavia may have been a love match despite the inappropriate age difference. The year Octavia married Marcellus, which was 54 BC, Julius Caesar put pressure on them to get divorced so that Octavia could marry Pompey. Pompey had been married to Caesar's daughter, Julia, and that marriage had cemented the first triumvirate, the alliance between Pompey, Caesar, and Crassus, also known as the Devil's Three-Way. But Julia had died that year, and Caesar wanted to make sure Pompey remarried to someone in his family. Octavia was his grandniece, so they could keep the triumvirate intact. But Marcellus and Octavia said no to Caesar. No, Caesar, no. No. They refused to divorce, and just to help them out, Pompey turned Octavia down and married someone else. I didn't want to marry her anyway. What a guy.
What a guy. Anyway, Octavia and Marcellus were married for 14 years and had 3 children together, a son and 2 daughters. Marcellus died in May of 40 BC. 5 months later, at the age of 29, Octavia found herself married to Antony, and this was not a love match. In fact, it was done by a senatorial decree.
I mean, could you imagine just if you woke up on a Monday morning and you found yourself married to Marc Antony by senatorial decree?
I mean, let's be honest.
I've had worse Mondays. I don't know.
I've definitely had worse Mondays and Fridays and Tuesdays. Anyway, Plutarch tells us that the senators, who were desperate to avoid another civil war, I mean, they seem to have one every generation.
But more than that, once every couple years now.
Exactly. And they had a lot of hope that Octavia's beauty, intelligence, dignity, and modesty as a perfect embodiment of Roman womanhood would easily win Antony over and get him to stop warring with Octavian, despite that face that you just want to punch, you smug little git.
I think it's going to take more than that, but, that's just me.
Plutarch says the hope was that, quote, when united to Antony and beloved by him, as such a woman naturally must be, Octavia would restore harmony and be their complete salvation. No pressure.
It's just all this emotional labor.
For Octavia, who already has 3 kids to raise?
At this point in the story, she just has the 3 children with her husband, Marcellus, who died.
This was a Roman trope, by the way. The idea of women serving as peacemakers for their husbands and male family members, bringing about an end to the war. This goes all the way back to the founding myth of the Sabine women, which is a delightful story about how Rome's first settlers kidnapped and raped the women from a neighboring community.
Delightful is deeply sarcastic here, and this is a shit myth. It's literally the worst founding myth.
It's a terrible founding myth.
It's really, that's your founding myth, and we're gonna aggrandize this society? Seriously?
Yeah, if this is how your country was founded, fuck you.
Right. Thank you, Jen. I agree.
When the women's fathers and brothers then went to war against the Romans, these women came between the two groups of men and negotiated a peace. Because, now they had children with their new husbands, in quotation marks, and wanted an end to fighting.
I've read a few different versions of this story, and the way that it was explained to me wherever I was reading this was like, now they were embedded in this new community, and they had these new babies, and they had these new husbands. And I'm like, well, these are like non-consensual relationships. What is happening here?
I mean, we are living in a culture where at any point in time, you can be overrun by other people and taken captive against your will. It is a different society, but also it kind of feels like it's just aggrandizing that.
I've read essays about the act of kidnapping women that's reproduced in Greek and Roman myth and how it is frequently aggrandized. And even in art history and like art critique today, it's not called what it is, which is rape. So there's that. And this is just one of many myths that involve that. Anyway. All this emotional labor was now dropped in Octavia's lap, where she was expected to bring her brother and her new husband to a sort of peace, thereby saving the country. So it's like a whole giant serving of like, please be our savior through conforming to the restrictive ideals of womanhood on Octavia's head.
Totally. But I also think the interesting thing about Octavia is she is one of the few people who had a legitimately good relationship with him.
With who? With Marc Antony?
No, with her brother.
Yeah, she's like one of two people I can think of off the top of my head who could basically stand to be in a room with Octavian for any length of time without punching him.
Exactly. So that is kind of not a dumb match on his part.
Exactly. No, I don't think it necessarily is. I think in the beginning, Antony didn't necessarily want this marriage either. In the 5 or 6 months he'd spent in Alexandria, he'd fallen in head over heels, can't stop thinking about her, can't stop bringing her up in conversation, stupid love with Cleopatra. He was aware, however, that his relationship with Cleopatra gave him an optics problem. Cleopatra was not exactly popular in Rome. In her own country, she was a goddess on earth. In Rome, she was a scheming, amoral seductress who conformed to all the most negative Roman stereotypes about effeminate, luxury-loving Easterners, monarchs, and strong women. While in Alexandria, Antony had mingled with the Alexandrians and adopted some of their customs, which tarred Antony with a kind of an emasculating brush, according to the ancient Romans, and the patriarchy was rank in ancient Rome, so this was the worst kind of brush to be tarred by, according to them. Ugh.
I mean, that's why the new Dionysus is such a great sort of nomenclature for Marc Antony, because Dionysus is the god of wine and revelry. He's effeminate. He's also a revolutionary. That's what we didn't talk about.
Hold up, it's the new Dionysus over here.
It's the new Dionysus at your window.
Everyone act like you don't recognize him.
Octavia, however, solved all those problems for Antony. She was the kind of dignified, modest, virtuous woman the Romans revered. If Antony wanted power in Rome, the best wife for him, optics-wise, was Octavia. Plutarch tells us that Antony's, quote, reason was battling with his love for the Egyptian. But eventually, power won out over love, and about 6 months after leaving Cleopatra, in October of 40 BC, Antony married Octavia.
Instagram teen accounts have automatic protections for what teens see and who can contact them, plus time management tools. And Instagram will continue adding built-in safety features to help create age-appropriate experiences. Learn more about teen accounts and Instagram's ongoing work to protect teens online at instagram.com/teenaccounts.
Around the time of his marriage, Antony and Octavian hammered out a treaty, the Treaty of Brundisium. It's said the soldiers on both sides were so happy about this treaty that a great cry of joy went up that echoed across the mountains. Everyone was so energetic about expressing their love for this treaty that people got trampled to death and drowned in the harbor.
Yeah, I guess they were really enthused.
They were so happy. There's not going to be another civil war. We're done with this shit.
Yeah, let's drown some people. It's like one of those weird details.
It's really just a typical Saturday night for Antony.
Like with most things with Marc Antony, stuff got completely out of hand.
Very quickly.
To mark the agreement, both armies threw massive parties for each other, all of them celebrating the return to peace. Communities all up and down the Italian peninsula feasted, celebrated, and sacrificed to the gods, and Antony minted coins with Octavia's face on them, making her the first Roman woman ever to have a coin with her face on it.
Really?
Yeah, because literally every time somebody's face gets on the coin, it's a first time. And we're not just saying that. We're like, we found it in a source that said it was the first time.
Yeah, and every single time we had this with the Caligula episode, we had this with Fulvia. Every single time it's the first time.
Antony and Octavian feasted each other too. Octavian in the Roman style and Marc Antony in the Egyptian and Asiatic style, which probably didn't help his optics problem. But even as these dinners were going on, attendees on both sides carried daggers under their clothes just in case the peace broke down. Stacy Schiff says, quote, conspiracies brewed and plots were extinguished throughout the cordial banqueting.
So under the bright surface of promised peace, the threat of violence still hummed. But the people were tired of this war, both in Rome and in the countryside. People were overtaxed and starving. The overall sentiment on the streets was that nobody cared whether Antony or Octavian won. The common people just wanted to get on with their lives. Enough already. Now that Antony had married Octavia, the threat of civil war was toned down for now. Two other threats to Rome's stability had to be dealt with. One was Sextus Pompey, Pompey Shark's last living son, who'd taken to a life of piracy on the high seas. Arrgh. After his father was defeated by Julius Caesar. Now Sextus was doing what pirates do, which was terrorize merchants and disrupt grain shipments. By the time Octavian and Antony signed their treaty, seabound trade had ground to a halt, and the people in Rome were starving.
Just to point this out, Pompey, a generation ago, had eradicated piracy from the Mediterranean, and now his son Sextus Pompey was turning to a life of piracy on the high seas, so...
Oh, the delicious, delicious irony.
Just sit with it for a minute. Sit with the irony. We'll wait. Have we sat with it long enough?
We've definitely sat with it long enough.
All right, moving on. The other threat was the Parthians. They were starting to go on the offensive, attacking and invading Rome's eastern provinces. They'd killed Antony's appointed governor in Syria and driven Herod, Antony's guy in Judea, out of his own country. According to the Treaty of Brundisium, Marc Antony would handle the Parthians while Octavian would deal with Sextus. Antony suggested that Octavian levy taxes on the people of Rome to pay for a war with Sextus, but the people in Rome rioted. They threatened to burn Sextus's mom alive in her own home if a peace wasn't negotiated pronto, because they did not want another civil war.
Of course not, and they didn't want any more goddamn taxes.
Right. Octavian himself went down to the forum to try to calm the crowd, but the crowd turned vicious, and Octavian was definitely no Julius Caesar. Everybody wanted to punch this guy. He was almost stoned to death.
He had to be rescued at the last minute by Marc Antony, who sent his troops into the forum from two directions, cut his way through a riot, and hauled Octavian out by the scruff of his neck, throwing him over his shoulder in a fireman's lift. And this was all super embarrassing for Octavian.
Maybe a little bit emasculating.
Buff Marc Antony throwing Octavian over his shoulder.
Antony was a paragon of rude health. Swoon.
I just imagine him being like, they'll be able to look at my toga!
As long as he's not wearing a chiton, I think he's okay.
Anyway, getting back to the situation at hand.
Do you think Octavian was wearing underwear at that moment?
You know my rule about underwear. I've got a Gisa about it.
She won't speculate on the wearing of underwear. Very limiting for the podcast.
Very limiting for the podcast. Anyway, people died in the riots. Marc Antony and his soldiers tossed corpses into the river so the public wouldn't actually see how many had died. Under massive public pressure, Octavian and Antony negotiated peace with Sextus rather than going to war.
But this peace was hardly rock solid. It's said that to celebrate the treaty, Sextus threw a banquet for Octavian and Antony on one of his ships. During the feasting, one of his generals took him aside and suggested that they just cut the ship's cables, murder Octavian and Antony right there, and take Rome for themselves. It would solve a whole bunch of problems right in one fell swoop.
Totally. It's what I would do.
Is it fell swoop or is it swell foop?
I think it's fell swoop.
Swell foop.
Fell swoop.
Sextus replied that a man of his honor and integrity couldn't possibly agree to do such a thing, and he kind of wished his general had just done it already without asking for permission.
Exactly. It's better to ask forgiveness than permission.
Just pick up what I'm putting down here, would ya?
Meanwhile, it was still Antony's job to handle the Parthians. But instead of doing it himself, because why, he sent a general of his, a guy named Ventidius, to go drive the Parthians out of the eastern provinces for him while he spent the winter in Athens with Octavia and their newborn daughter named...
There's only one name in the name bucket, Jen.
It's on the tip of my tongue.
Antonia.
That's it. maybe he decided he was entitled to a honeymoon. Maybe he just hadn't fucked about enough, because that's pretty much what this was. In Athens, Antony made an attempt to live a simple life. He adopted Athenian dress, reduced his entourage to only a trusted handful, and spent his time attending lectures and religious festivals, exercising naked in a local gymnasium, enjoying the local food, and going to the theater. Can we just say, like, yeah, I'll just go and live in the simple life in Athens and eat all the most delicious food and just enjoy the incredible culture and, yeah, run away from my problems. Sounds perfect.
That's basically what's happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Marc Antony is onto something. We give him a lot of shit, but this sounds like a good plan.
He just farmed his whole Parthia idea out to Ventidius right now.
It's called delegating.
Maybe Julius Caesar can come on and tell us that a good leader delegates.
Julius Caesar would prefer not to speak about that scoundrel.
Julius Caesar, is he weeping about Cleopatra and Marc Antony right now?
Yes.
Oh, Julius Caesar, really? Oh, honey, come here, bring it in. Bring it in.
Julius Caesar will be very happy when the scoundrel gets what he deserves.
He's making my shirt all wet right now.
Julius Caesar will continue to write his epic, beautiful, heart-rending poetry.
Oh, you're working on your opus. Okay, I look forward to it.
All right. Julius Caesar, go have some wine, write your epic poetry. I hope it's better than the stuff you read to the pirates. Let's get back to our story.
You poor thing. All right, there.
Look, he had a rough year. It's only been 2 years since he was assassinated. He clearly didn't see that coming. The Athenians were good sports about it and took a page from the Alexandrian playbook, playing along with Marc Antony's common person affectations, pretending not to recognize him when he went out in the streets and probably peeped in their windows, you freak.
He's just like, he takes his rings off and he takes his cloak off and he wears like a regular shirt and he thinks that covers it and people don't realize it's him.
And this time, instead of having stamped across his forehead, "Return to Cleopatra," it's just "Return to Octavia."
Does he know that that's on his forehead?
To be fair, he probably got so drunk, he was like, I don't know where I'm going. Point me in the direction of Octavia.
I mean, he probably just fell down in the street a lot and actually had to be returned to Octavia or Cleopatra or whoever.
Whoever he was with this time, Fulvia, we don't know.
Cythera, Fulvia.
The Athenians renamed their Pan-Athenic festival games after him and proclaimed him the new Dionysus once again. And here's the thing. Antony preferred to be addressed that way.
Pretend you don't recognize him, but also refer to him as the new Dionysus.
Where my man is at?
Hold up. It's the new Dionysus. Where my man is at? Antony reveled in his title as the new Dionysus.
Of course he did. What else would he be doing?
I know. According to Stacey Schiff, he, quote, conspicuously built a hut of branches. This is what Antony was doing when he should have been invading Parthia. He built a hut of branches, decorated it with drums, tambourines, greenery, animal skins, and other Dionysian props, and lay inside with his friends beginning at dawn and got drunk. So, Jen, can we just go into a little bit more detail about the Dionysian props?
Dionysus was associated with bulls, so there would have been some kind of like bull skull thing somewhere. He was also associated with his maenads, so there would definitely be some like beautiful but also dangerous looking women, probably just like singing and chanting. Definitely some men dressed as satyrs with giant raging erections that never went down. They were just always out. Some grapes, some grapevines somewhere, because he is the god of wine. Some panthers, because he's also associated with panthers. There would have been a thyrsus, which was kind of like a staff wound with ivy and dripping with honey. Snakes are also associated with Dionysus because Dionysus, in addition to being the god of wine, was also a fertility god. He was a god of excess and orgiastic religious ecstasy. He's a god of madness.
But nice, fun madness, right?
Well, the Greeks believed in a lot of like balance, like everything in moderation. So the thing about wine and Dionysus is wine was seen as something that could take away all the pain of the world, could make you feel better, could help you sleep, could ease anxiety and stuff like that. But if you drank too much of it, if you fell too deep into those cups, you could go right into madness. So it was both a good thing and a bad thing. And that's kind of what Dionysus was. He was both this god who could give you joy and allow you to be free, and also he could destroy you. And Dionysus, much like Apollo, flirts with this ridiculous beauty, and he is sort of both masculine and feminine. And we'll talk about all of this in the Dionysus episode. I don't want to go on too much of a tangent here, but that is another thing that they're using slightly to emasculate Marc Antony.
I kind of feel like probably Marc Antony was missing some of the nuances of Dionysus when he took on this title, the new Dionysus, because my feeling is that Marc Antony was just honing in on the wine and revelry bit.
Yeah, the other thing that we'll talk about when we get to our Dionysus episode, which is coming soon, is Dionysus was the god that people who rebelled against Rome, like Mithridates and Spartacus, took as their patron god. And the reason why is because Dionysus rolled up into your town and he fucked shit up. If you did not worship him, if you did not respect his godhood, he would destroy you.
So basically giving Marc Antony this nickname was a little bit subversive in a way.
In a way, it was a little bit subversive. Yeah. So Marc Antony really would have seen this as just like, hey, let me get my maenads. Let me get my satyrs with their raging erections. Let me get my grapevines. Let me get my panther. I got a panther.
I feel like he would have been looking at the surface trappings of Dionysus and maybe not focusing in on the dangerousness of Dionysus as much, you know? Because I feel like, in a way, it's kind of a backhanded thing where they're saying, like, Marc Antony is the one who's going to rebel against the power in Rome, but Marc Antony would have seen himself as the power in Rome.
Absolutely. And also, it's kind of one of those things where, like, Marc Antony is the god of drunken orgies. Like, that's how they're looking at it. And very much, from his point of view, he would be thinking of Bacchus, who kind of is the god of drunken orgies, a bit less of this revolutionary god that the Greeks would have had.
So Bacchus is the Roman version of Dionysus, but he is more about just being Cuervo Man or something.
Pretty much. The other thing that's interesting about him is Dionysus traveled the world, and that's also what Antony was doing. He was traveling through Asia and spreading his new god status.
Definitely spreading something. Anyway, so Antony has been lying in this tent with all these Dionysian props and accoutrements and possibly some panthers and things, and he's just lying in there getting drunk when he should be invading Parthia. The Athenians also proclaimed Octavia the new Athena, and there may have been some kind of symbolic marriage of their city because Athena was Athens' patron goddess to Dionysus, and Antony graciously accepted the honor and then turned around and demanded an outrageous payment from the city of Athens as a dowry for his new bride. It's an asshole. He's such an asshole. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's about right.
He's such a fucking train wreck. It's like, really? It's believed that Antony genuinely fell in love with Octavia and was deeply happy with her, which must have made everyone in Rome breathe a sigh of relief. Their plan to pacify Antony through love had worked. Plutarch claims Antony was, quote, very much in love with Octavia, being by nature excessively fond of women.
Time passed in Athens, and before Antony knew it, it had been 2 years since he'd seen Cleopatra. And what was she up to during that time? Around the same time Antony married Octavia, Cleopatra gave birth to twins, and they were Antony's twins because that guy just cannot stop spreading it around.
Yeah, but luckily Cleopatra got to name them because Antony wasn't around.
And they had great names. They were a boy and a girl. And she named them Alexander Helios after the sun and Cleopatra Selene after the moon.
I actually think their names are really beautiful, but also very self-aggrandizing.
Absolutely. She called one the sun and one the moon. The news of Antony's marriage most likely did not go over well with Cleopatra for both personal and political reasons. Cleopatra did not like Octavian. She hated that face.
Hate that guy. Punch him.
The guy Caesar had picked for his heir rather than her own son, Caesar's kid, Caesarion. I don't know what would have pissed her off more, Antony marrying someone else or renewing his alliance with Octavian.
Does Julius Caesar have anything to say here?
Julius Caesar thinks that the Lady Cleopatra is much better off without Antony.
I figured you'd say that.
Antony fucks anything and anyone anywhere.
Well, this is rich coming from you.
Would you like to try that again, Ms. Williamson?
Oh, I think you heard me the first time. Didn't he learn this trick from you, this whole seducing of sophisticated women?
Antony is not great at seducing sophisticated women.
Oh?
No, he can't keep them. Unlike Julius Caesar and Servilia.
Servilia was an outside cat, though, wouldn't you say?
Julius Caesar is an outside lion.
Why do we have this guy on? He just comes on and he aggrandizes himself, and then he goes in the corner and cries.
He fucks off and cries over his bad poetry.
I know.
So it's very likely that Cleopatra had spies among Antony's people and that she tracked his every move. Even without the personal aspect, Cleopatra was very politically astute, and her standing depended on her relationship with Rome. She had to keep tabs on things, and it's very possible the news of Antony's impending Parthia campaign raised her hopes, because Antony would need her money to invade Parthia. New wife and daughter or no, Antony would be back. This reminds me of Hamilton, of the song You'll Be Back, that King George sings when America leaves. My favorite line of it is, I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love.
Oh, that sounds like something Cleopatra would say. I mean, she will send a luxury yacht flotilla to remind you of her love.
Exactly. We'll put it in the show notes.
Like we said before, while Antony was in Athens, he sent a subordinate of his, a guy named Ventidius, to go drive the Parthians out of Rome's eastern provinces. Ventidius proved very successful. From late 40 to 38 BC, through a combination of strategy and subterfuge, he'd managed to deal the Parthians a resounding defeat, using sling bullets to attack the Parthians' impressive horse archers in the final battle. And the Parthians were a Scythian culture. If you want to know more about Scythians, we talk about them in Amazon's Warrior Women of the Ancient Steppe, which is an older episode, but a good one. So Ventidius didn't take the battle into the Parthians' ancestral territory because he feared Marc Antony would never forgive him for stealing his glory. Now that Ventidius had softened them up for him, Marc Antony was ready to go to Parthia himself, finish up the job, and take all the credit.
Oh, it's like he's been reading Pompey's playbook.
I know, this is the Pompey playbook right here.
So after about 2 years in Athens, hanging out with his new wife and daughter, Antony started getting ready for war. To pay all the troops he needed, Antony had to tax the populace. This raised the ire of Sextus, who'd gained some Roman provinces in the Treaty of Brundisium. Sextus rebelled, Octavian was stuck dealing with it, and suddenly both Antony and Octavian needed to share resources to win these battles they were both fighting. But over the past couple of years, after Antony's marriage from 40 to 38 BC, the relationship between Octavian and Antony had become increasingly strained. I can't imagine why. Antony's just fucking off in Athens, and Octavian's doing all this work of ruling.
Antony really does not want to have to do any work at this point in his life. Like, he's done.
He's like, I'm 40, guys! Yeah, I'm gonna have a year-long birthday party!
Time for a sabbatical. You may all henceforth refer to me as the new Dionysus.
You know what? I totally want to do that for my 40th.
I'm down. I'll be the new Isis to your new Dionysus, Jen.
So you can absolutely understand why these two were not thrilled with each other. Even if there hadn't been the bad blood between them that went back to Julius Caesar's will, these two would have hated each other. They could not have been more different. Marc Antony was a manly sort of dude, big and muscular and robust, totally comfortable in the middle of a battle. And Octavian was kind of a coward because he was constantly calling out sick for his battles.
Marc Antony had a big personality and kind of a rough and tumble charm. Animals and small children probably liked him. He no doubt exuded natural warmth. I kind of feel like this is kind of a thing about Marc Antony. Like, he was a big softie under there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a total war elephant, but underneath that, he just wanted to be loved, and he was just gonna love whoever loves him, you know? He's like a big softie.
For as long as they loved him.
You kind of see that when he gets together with Octavia. She probably, showered him with love, and he just ate it right up because he needed it.
Yeah.
Whereas Octavian was chilly and charmless and paranoid. He could not understand why the populace didn't love him, no matter how much money and grain he showered on them. But despite all that, Octavian was a lot smarter than Marc Antony, and in all their interactions, big and small, Antony frequently came away confused as to what just happened, suspecting he'd somehow been outmaneuvered, but unable to put his finger on how.
Marc Antony had absolutely no guile. He was a straightforward kind of person, and Octavian was all guile. Stone cold Slytherin versus a Hufflepuff or Gryffindor. What do we think Marc Antony was? Gryffindor?
Oh, probably a Gryffindor. Maybe a Hufflepuff.
So Stacy Schiff tells us that, quote, somehow Octavian managed to best his elder, even in casual games of skill and chance. Whether the two bet on a cockfight, or played cards when they cast lots to decide political matters. If they tossed a ball between them, Marc Antony inevitably and probably wound up diminished. And it's easy to see why Octavian could spin any outcome to his advantage. If he lost excessive amounts at the gaming table, it was, he explained, only because he behaved with excessive sportsmanship. Adrian Goldsworthy, in his book, Antony and Cleopatra, tells us that Octavian continually undermined Marc Antony in more serious matters too. They just could not cooperate. He says, quote, "If Octavian promised one thing, he delivered another. If Antony headed east, Octavian summoned him west, then neglected to appear. It made for a tenuous balancing act, but one that Antony was determined to maintain. He swallowed his pride and masked his irritation, even as his patience was rubbed raw."
Over the past 2 years, for various reasons, Antony had swallowed his pride a lot around Octavian, which was why, in 38 BC, when the two got together to negotiate an arms deal that was supposed to help them both, they couldn't even be in the same room together without fighting. It was Octavia who insisted on negotiating a peace. At this point, Octavia was pregnant with her second daughter with Antony. She insisted on coming with him on this excursion and further demanded that he send her to talk to Octavian. Look, no one else can talk to him but me. Just stop trying, I will handle it. She charmed Octavian's friends and then prevailed on Octavian's love for her, delivering an impassioned speech in which she reminded him that, as wife of one imperator and sister to another, if there was war between them, it was gonna suck for her, regardless of who won. So Octavian, who was so rarely moved by pity, was actually moved by pity, if you can believe it. He agreed to be on his best behavior, and he met Marc Antony in the city of Tarentum. There, they hammered out an agreement to stay triumvirs and partners for the next 5 years. Octavian agreed to give Antony about 20,000 legions for the Parthian War, and Antony pledged to give Octavian ships for his war against Sextus. Octavia also persuaded Antony to throw in an additional 20 light sailing ships for Octavian.
After that, Marc Antony was ready to take on the Parthians. He sent Octavia back to Italy with their daughter Antonia and the baby on the way. She also had the care of Antony's 2 sons with Fulvia, as well as her 3 children by Marcellus.
Right, so the current count of children in Octavia's house, let's see. There's 2 daughters with Antony, including the one that's coming, so that's basically 2. And then 2 sons with Fulvia, those are Antony's kids, and then her 3 kids, that is 7 children in Octavia's house.
7 kids. Marc Antony never saw Octavia again. After seeing her off, Antony headed for Syria and then sent for Cleopatra.
So that's it for this week. Join us in 2 weeks for the next installment in this story. And in the meantime, connect with us on social at Ancient Hist Fan on Twitter or Ancient History Fangirl on Facebook and Instagram.
Also, if you want more of us in the meantime, we have Patreon, and you can listen to extra episodes just for subscribers. These are shorter episodes, mini-sodes, between 10 and 30 minutes. I mean, there's nothing mini about a 30-minute episode, but I digress.
That's the thing about the mini-sodes. It's about us digressing.
Exactly. And they deal with things that we didn't get to cover in our longer episodes. Starting at just $2 a month, you can subscribe and get more episodes from us in your feed. And for $10 a month, you can even suggest topics that we'll cover. And you can find it at patreon.com/Ancient History Fangirl.
This podcast isn't free to produce or maintain, and it also takes a lot of time. We can use all the help we can get to keep it going. The Patreon is a great way to support the podcast, and you can also make a one-time donation to our Ko-Fi account. The link is on the homepage of our website at ancienthistoryfangirl.com, or you can check out our merch. We have some amazing merch, Jen, don't we?
We really do. And if you're a fan of Julius Caesar, we have just the coolest Julius Caesar merch. We've got incredible Amazon's merch. I don't know if we'll have launched one of the ones that I'm thinking about right now, but there's something really exciting coming from an actual fan of the podcast and incredibly talented artist.
I think that's Joy Taylor, and that would be the Pompey Shark merch, which we're really psyched about. It'll be out. Yeah, I think it will. And if you're not in a place to give money, we hear you. You can support us for free by leaving us a kind review. We can't tell you how much we love seeing reviews. It really makes this worth it.
I mean, the positive reviews. If you don't like what we do, but you've actually listened all the way to the end of this episode, we don't need to know.
You're probably either hate listening, or you really love us, or you secretly love us.
It's okay to secretly love us.
Julius Caesar hate listens, I'm pretty sure.
All the time. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
I came, I saw, I flailed. It's been months since you bid Marc Antony farewell on the banks of the river Euphrates, watched him march off toward the low, dusty hills at the head of his army, his shoulders straight and his spirits high, as if he'd already won this war. You watched the news from Rome of his triumphs and conquests, the people dancing in the streets, sacrificing in his name to the gods. And now, after months, this message, you read it again just to be sure. Come quickly, do not delay. Bring food and supplies and money. Lots of money. His hand is rude and inelegant, a hasty scrawl on a scrap of skin, and there's desperation in every stroke. Something's gone horribly wrong. Parthia is a land of burning deserts and sharp, stony mountains, poison rivers and people who brook no trespass. Caesar had planned 3 years for his own invasion, and as little as you know of war, you know this. Parthia cannot be conquered in a matter of months. He shouldn't be back this soon. You begged him not to go. Come back to Alexandria, you told him. Stay with me beneath the palm fronds. Let us sip chilled wine with all the sea and sky spread out before us. Let us live and love in my city, the jewel in the eye of the world. But Antony had to have his victory, and so once again you let him go. Some among your advisors suggest that you let him languish. Choose another from among the Roman aristocracy, they say, one with a better grip on power. But now you can feel his need, pulling at you from across the sea, and you know you will not abandon him. You're a practical soul, willing to do what must be done, but even you wouldn't turn on Antony. So you go down to the docks, impatient to see to the preparations yourself, ships stuffed to the rafters with thick wool clothes, barrels of wine, food for the hungry, and money. Marc Antony always needs money. He's out there somewhere, hungry and desperate and alone, watching the horizon. Every day you don't cross is another day, he despairs. Finally, the tides turn. Your ships are supplied and they're ready to go, and you stand at the helm with the wind at your back. Beneath your feet, the seams of the ship creak with every forward stroke of the rowers. You close your eyes and you send him a message in the quiet of your mind. You're coming. Just a few more nights on that snowy strip of beach. You'll show him you keep your promises. I'm Jenny Williamson.
And I'm a robot rowboat.
And this is Ancient History Fangirl.
So, in our last episode, Marc Antony had spent a really intense few months in Alexandria with Cleopatra, and the two fell head over heels in love.
Swoon!
So swoon. But it was not to last, because Antony's wife, Fulvia, the badass boss bitch that she was, picked a fight with Octavian, whose face you kinda just want to slap. Anyway, as a result of this big old fight, Antony was forced to go back to Greece to deal with the whole fallout. In the aftermath of that, Antony and Fulvia had a massive row. Fulvia fell into a terrible depression and died. Or maybe was poisoned. I'm team poison.
I don't know that I'm on necessarily any team. I'm not taking a stand here. It could have been either one.
I mean, it could have been either one. It's the ancient world. But I mean, if there's a chance that I can advocate that there is a poison assassin working behind the scenes, I'm always going to be like, that is my choice. All the intrigue.
Bear in mind that there were no antibiotics back then, so she could have just gotten a really bad infection or something.
Yeah, she could have just scraped her hand on a rusty hairpin, on the hairpin that she stabbed through Cicero's tongue.
Still got Cicero cooties on that hairpin.
Cicero still has quite a bite. Boom!
The revenge of Cicero. There's nothing in the historical record to indicate that happened.
This is the pure speculation that you sign up for in this podcast. So in order to secure a peace, Antony married Octavian's sister Octavia, and this was the band-aid that patched up the Second Triumvirate and prevented a civil war. So well done, because women have to be thrown into the role of marrying someone to keep peace.
Yeah, we talked about that in episode 2.
Antony had spent several happy years married to Octavia, but his relationship with her brother Octavian had devolved to the point where they could barely be in the same room together.
So around 36 BC, about 4 years into her marriage to Antony, Octavia helped negotiate an arms deal where Antony gave Octavian ships to go fight Sextus Pompey, the pirate. Arrgh! We're just doing this every time Sextus Pompey comes up now. And Octavian promised Antony 20,000 ships to help him fight the Parthians, who are currently raising trouble in the east. Then Marc Antony went off to go deal with the Parthians, and he sent Octavia home to Italy with their 2 daughters. He never saw her again. The minute he got to his military base in Syria, he sent for Cleopatra. So this is a point in the story where historians argue about what led to this. Yes, Antony had spent 4 or 5 or 6, I don't know, really intense months with Cleopatra in Alexandria, but that's basically all, Like, it really surprises me that they didn't spend that long together. But at this point, he'd been married to Octavia for 4 years, and he really seemed to love Octavia. Not to mention, Octavia had just stepped in to help him negotiate with Octavian, proving herself indispensable to Antony. They had 2 daughters together. He seemed really settled and happy with Octavia, so why did he send for Cleopatra?
Plutarch chalks Antony's behavior up to passion. He says, quote, "The dire evil which had been slumbering for a long time, namely his passion for Cleopatra, which men thought had been charmed away and lulled to rest by better considerations, blazed up with renewed power as he drew near to Syria." Did my voice give you the eye roll I'm feeling?
Like, everything Plutarch says prompts an eye roll from this corner.
The thing is, that still doesn't answer the question, why now? Beyond Antony's feelings, there was a practical reason to send for Cleopatra. She was the richest and most powerful client ruler among Antony's provinces in the east. He needed her financial support to invade Parthia. So as long as that was his goal, it was only a matter of time before Antony and Cleopatra had to be in a room together again. Looking at it from that angle, it only makes sense for him to send her a message now.
Some argue that Antony had absolutely no intention of starting up his affair with Cleopatra again. He just meant to get her financial support to fight the Parthians. Others suggest that he was open to starting an affair because Marc Antony was, let's face it, not big on monogamy.
Because let's face it, another word to describe Marc Antony is open. 24 hours, 7 days a week.
There's always an open sign flashing over his forehead.
Exactly. He's exactly the kind of creepy hotel you find down a dark desert highway.
The Marc Antony Hotel. Don't ask, don't tell.
You can check in, but you never leave.
Anyway, but according to this argument, he didn't anticipate necessarily breaking things off with Octavia to be with Cleopatra. But there's another piece of the puzzle here, Antony's relationship with Octavian, Octavia's brother. We talked about how this relationship had devolved in the last episode. It's possible that turning back to Cleo was, in part, a rebellion against Octavian, who, despite the agreement of Tarentum, had delivered one insult too many.
We'll never really know for sure, but we do know that Cleopatra had absolutely no ambivalence about Marc Antony. This time, when she got his message, Cleopatra did not delay or bother with silver oars and incense. She got on a fast ship, bringing her 2 children with Antony, and sailed immediately to meet him. Cleopatra and Antony hadn't seen each other for about 4 years. The two met in Antioch, a city in modern-day Turkey, and it must have been a happy, passionate reunion. If we're going with the theory that Antony meant this meeting to be a platonic, practical discussion about army supplies and logistics, or if he only meant to start up a casual fling, well, that is not how this went down. Marc Antony caved fast.
Oh, surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. He caved about as fast as one of those collapsible toothbrushes.
He's collapsible furniture.
Yeah! Oh, that's a good metaphor for Marc Antony. Anyway, Mark caved so fast Antony was like, I'm done. 5 minutes after Cleopatra was in Antioch, he'd acknowledged the 3-year-old twins as his own, something Caesar had never done with Caesarion, and then started showering Cleopatra with territories. He made her ruler of Cyprus, a land historically belonging to Egypt, which Rome had requisitioned about 22 years ago. He also threw in other territories like Cyrene, parts of Cilicia, Syria, and Crete, and a string of cities all up and down the Phoenician coast. These territories were rich in natural resources and enriched Cleopatra greatly. He also granted her part of Judea, the part where the country's richest exports came from.
Antony rearranged monarchs and dynasties in order to make Cleopatra the undisputed ruler of many of these territories, and this greatly raised her status as a ruler. It restored to Egypt almost all the lands it had controlled in the days of Ptolemy I and lost since. To celebrate Antony's generosity, Cleopatra introduced a new dating system.
Wait, was this like an ancient world Tinder?
It's a dating platform for client queens who want to hook up with powerful Roman protectors.
It'd be her public service to other client queens who are like, I guess I need a powerful Roman backer. Don't swipe on Lepidus, guys. We know he has a big army, and we know he's super nice, especially to women and his wife, but
he's not going to do so good when it comes to the military backing part.
I mean, that's the problem. Lepidus is good at keeping the peace, but not at getting you new territories. He is good at keeping the peace.
He could roll in and like calm everyone down and make everyone tea and make sure everyone sees eye to eye. That's how Lepidus handles things.
Yeah, Lepidus is a really good calming influence. He did win some early military battles. Caesar did trust him. We do know he loved his wife.
He's the littlest triumvir. Aw. Well, let's move on from here. Cleopatra did not introduce the new ancient world Tinder. What she did... It's not the case.
Oh, I'm deeply disappointed, Cleopatra. I had high hopes.
Sorry. What she did was introduce a new system of dating, referring to the year of Antony's gifts as year 1 in her official records, so a new calendar system.
When you think about Cleopatra and you think about the stroking of Antony's ego that was needed, makes total sense. She's just like, there were no years in this new millennia until you came along and gifted me things, Antony. And Antony was like, that is true.
It's yet more stroking and petting. You were the year 1 of my life, Antony. Swoon. She bestowed on herself elaborate new titles, and a few months after her arrival in Antioch, she was pregnant again with her 3rd child with Marc Antony.
Surprise!
She's super fertile, or he's super fertile, and she's super fertile.
I think they're both super fertile.
He's one of those people that, like, looks at you intensely, and you have to go take a pregnancy test.
Well, you know why, right?
Germanicus, I know, the connection.
And Agrippina!
The fertility runs hot in the Julio-Claudian line. Meanwhile, Antony continued his preparations for Parthia and was ready to depart in the spring. Cleopatra traveled with him hundreds of miles out of her way to bid him farewell on the banks of the Euphrates River in eastern Turkey. Then she watched Antony march off to war with his army, and Cleopatra took the long way home, touring each one of her newly gifted territories, because she didn't mean to just be a ruler from afar. She meant to actually legitimately rule in all of these new territories.
It makes sense when you think about her background. Like, she was like kicked out of her own territory, so she wanted to know who these people were.
And also just make sure that all this new money and stuff comes to her, you know, all the tribute.
Absolutely. Send it my way or else.
Exactly. You think you're not going to actually pay taxes to me? Well, I'm here to disabuse you of that misconception.
This is not an honorary position.
One of the things Cleopatra did on her way home was visit King Herod, the ruler of Judea, who'd suddenly found the profitable parts of his country ripped out from under him. Murderous plotting ensued, and it's kind of a rabbit hole, so we're not going to go into it here, but we are going to do a mini-sode on it. Actually, 2 mini-sodes. It's our first mini arc, Jen.
We heard the term mini-sode and we're like, we don't know how to do anything under a half an hour, so maxi-sode!
We broke it up, though, because it's basically got 2 parts, but it's King Herod and Cleopatra wouldn't touch you with a barge pole, because these two loathed each other. It'll drop on December 5th and January 2nd, unless we hit our next Patreon goal super fast, which is $500 a month. If we do that, we're going to start releasing these twice a month, and then you'll get it sooner. I don't know. I'm not in the future. I don't know what's going to happen.
So after her grand tour, Cleopatra went home to Egypt, and for the next few months, from spring into summer, she kept track of the news from Rome of all the great things Antony was doing in Parthia. People in Rome were celebrating his many and glorious victories. They were performing sacrifices to the gods and throwing citywide festivals in his honor. It was very clear that Antony was killing it in Parthia. Well done, Antony.
Doing such a good job subjugating the Parthians.
This is what you set out to do, and you had a plan, and you achieved it, and you didn't need Caesar's help. This is where kind of broken down older Romans go to die a la Crassus, but it's fine. It's fine, Antony.
We're not going to poke a hole in that or anything.
Here's the thing. Late in the year of 36 BC, a messenger arrived at Cleopatra's court. He implored Cleopatra to come quickly. Antony was camped out in a small village near modern-day Beirut, with a harbor deep enough for a luxury yacht flotilla. Antony said to come as soon as she could and bring food, clothing, and most importantly, money. Because when Marc Antony is involved, you're always going to need to bankroll something.
Oh God, he always needs money.
Always. There was something a little off about this message. It had only been a few months. No way Antony had conquered all of Parthia that quickly. Caesar had planned to spend at least 3 years there. Turns out, invading Parthia was a big mistake.
I am shocked.
Shocker! I mean, we've never seen any general of Rome go into Parthia and have a bad time. They've always come back saying water slides and ice cream.
Julius Caesar, what do you think of this?
Marc Antony, can you not see a trap? Can you not smell it? Did you not have enough experience in the Gallic Wars to understand when you are being tricked by a boy half your age?
What we're about to reveal in the telling of Marc Antony's time in Parthia is that Marc Antony indeed could not smell a trap if it farted in his face.
Julius Caesar is very disappointed. As a master and one who could spot a trap 50 miles away, how could I have had a protege like Antony who was unable to detect even the slightest form of subtlety?
I mean, not to bring up painful memories or anything, but there are a few key points in your life where you did not smell a trap.
But didn't I? Well, one does learn from one's mistakes, and one betters oneself and becomes dictator and living god.
I mean, I'm an atheist. I don't think there are gods.
You do believe in Julius Caesar.
Well, touche. I do. I do believe in Julius Caesar. And now you're a dead god. Okay, we're moving on. From the minute he got to Parthia, you could see Antony using Julius Caesar's playbook. And Caesar, this is not an invitation to butt in, okay?
Well, Julius Caesar knows that if Antony was using his playbook, he clearly hadn't read all the way through. He just read some bullet points and didn't actually give him the steps he needed to succeed. Oh, Antony, do better.
Julius Caesar's getting worked up. So you're saying he read the Cliff Notes version if he read it at all?
He lived most of it. You would have thought that he actually learned something, but I guess all that time fucking around and puking in the Senate House must have killed quite a few brain cells.
Oh, Julius Caesar knows about brain cells.
Julius Caesar knows about many things. I wrote a book about grammar.
So, we're gonna move on.
I dedicated that book to a one Cicero who...
Moving on.
It was an ironic dedication.
I can't believe I wrote this sentence and now I have to say it because now I'm aggrandizing Caesar, who's sitting right next to me, looking excited about me aggrandizing him.
One does love to hear oneself spoken so highly of from the lips of Ms. Jenny Williamson.
Oh, God, stop. This is an evil laugh. It's just literally the truth. Marc Antony was no Julius Caesar. He tried to seize the element of surprise, pushing his army to move fast through rugged terrain. But to move fast, he had to abandon his massive siege equipment and other stuff he needed. Leaving his siege engines behind cost him badly the first time he tried to besiege a city. His army took forever raising earthworks, and they were surrounded and slain by horse archers who were allies of the besieged before they could even come close to breaking into the city. The Parthian horse archers were a problem. They were constantly luring Antony's army to attack and then melting off into the desert, leading Antony's army on pointless, draining chases. Marc Antony ran out of supplies and his people started to starve. Bands of Parthians attacked his men whenever they tried to forage for food. Over and over, the Parthians lured him into ambushes and kicked his army's ass.
One of the Parthians' favorite tricks was to send their soldiers wandering around Antony's camp with their bows unstrung, which was a sign of peace, mingling with them as they foraged for food, and just kind of casually chatting and shooting the shit. There was some fraternizing. The Parthians would be super friendly. They'd complain about their own generals and compliment the Roman soldiers on their excellent fighting skills and hardiness in the tough terrain.
Hey, wow, you guys are really good fighters. You're doing so well.
Look at those biceps and look at those delts. I mean, yeah.
We're all really impressed over here on the Parthian side, let me tell you.
It's not as if we couldn't just like restring this bow immediately and kill you before you could breathe. It's fine.
And also, wow, look at the big horsehair plumes on your helmets, which are totally not making up for a sensitivity about being short.
They were shorter than everyone else.
Yeah, that's like built into their like xenophobia about the Gauls. The Gauls were all tall, hairy giants.
All the penises on classical statues are small for that reason as well.
Oh, what reason?
I'm pretty sure I read this somewhere that like having like a big penis.
Just a monster dong.
It was like a sign of like low birth and low standing. So that's why a lot of times in like classical artwork, the dongs are not that big.
I always wondered why the dongs were teensy.
I mean, I always assumed they were growers, but you know.
I certainly hope they were growers. I'm just like looking at a big nude statue of Hercules or something, and I'm like, I'm disappointed, deeply disappointed.
Like, I'm like 97% sure it's true. Anyway, inevitably, the Parthians would sort of casually suggest that Antony didn't want to take that route down through the plains. Definitely not. That was the route where Crassus got his head chopped off. Remember him? Yeah, don't take that route. Definitely take this other route through the mountains. A route that turned out in hindsight to be extremely ambushy.
The problem was that Antony just had zero guile, and he had a hard time with the idea of other people being totally shady liars. Over and over in Parthia, you see him believing people he shouldn't believe and trusting people he shouldn't trust. He listened to Parthian guides who led his army into traps. Local allies promised to send troops and supplies and then conveniently forgot. Whoopsie. Even Octavian never sent those 20,000 troops he promised at Terentium.
Oh, Miss Williamson.
Oh, hold up. Julius Caesar has an opinion.
Does the man have no common sense? He had this general named Ventidius, didn't he?
Yeah, Ventidius actually kicked out the Parthians from Rome's Asian territories. Ventidius was used to fighting the Parthians.
Yes. Where was Ventidius? What groundwork did he lay? Did he get to know the different tribes and the different people and who he could trust and where was a safe route? Who was doing the research? You can't just trust men wandering through a battlefield with unstrung bows, just telling you how wonderful you are. They're clearly lying. Where, Marc Antony, was your box of disguises? Who were you sending in amongst the Parthians, blending in to see what their culture is like?
When you look at what Julius Caesar did, not to aggrandize Julius Caesar, but when you look at...
Oh, it's not aggrandizing when it's true, Miss Williamson.
Okay, I'm gonna make my point.
It's just a true fact.
Look at what Julius Caesar did, Jen, right? In Gaul, Julius Caesar was always turning tribes against each other, and he knew who the tribes were, and he knew what the alliances were, and he was always using that to his benefit, you know, to like divide and conquer. And I'm not seeing Antony doing that here. Like, I just wonder if he's falling down with the intelligence.
Julius Caesar would like to remind you that this is why it takes more than a whim to invade Parthia. There are so many things that you must do if you don't want to suffer defeat at the hands of ridiculousness.
Is that what's happening right now? Marc Antony is suffering defeat at the hands of ridiculousness.
Julius Caesar knows that in order to effectively invade anywhere, you must build up your spy network. You must know the people you're fighting. It's very clear that if Antony had spent less time fucking about with my grandniece in Athens, he would have understood his enemy. He would have been able to mount a campaign knowing where was safe, who he could trust, and who he could turn. And instead, he just blundered into it like the war elephant he is. You know, he might have done better if he had a war elephant, which were extremely outdated by then anyway.
Well, I don't know if he would have done better. I mean, this is a really dry area, and war elephants need a lot of water.
Julius Caesar was using the thing known as sarcasm.
Julius Caesar, I think it's time to elevate your game. This is the lowest form of wit.
As Ms. Williamson said, when you're invading somewhere dry like Parthia, and you leave all your siege engines behind to move faster, you run the risk of not being able to rebuild your siege engines and earthworks at all because there's no wood, because you don't know the terrain. When you haven't done your research and you leave behind valuable things, you're not actually thinking about what you're going to need when you besiege a town. And this was a very key, crucial error that Antony made. His other errors are he's not secured a fresh water supply anywhere. That is a massive problem in the area he's fighting.
A lot of stupid mistakes here. But despite his many and varied screw-ups, Antony was a beloved commander. Here's what Antony did right, okay? If we're going to be fair, he shared his troops' hardships, visited the wounded, suffered and starved along with them. There was that time he decimated a legion because of poor performance. Like, he wasn't a master manipulator.
No, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, Antony, this is Jen. Antony is definitely a war elephant. If he could fix it quickly by being a lad amongst the men, great. If he couldn't, decimation, man. I ain't got time.
The army was not well provisioned. Even when they found grain growing in fields, turned out they'd abandoned all their implements for grinding it, which is just like a fundamental mistake. I guess those were with the siege engines. The troops were forced to forage in a land where they weren't familiar with the plants, and out of ignorance or starvation, many ate plants that were poisonous. Plutarch says some troops ate plants that drove them mad or killed them, and he describes, quote, "He who ate of these poison plants had no memory and no thought of anything else than the one task of moving or turning every stone, as if he were accomplishing something of great importance. The plain was full of men stooping to the ground and digging around the stones or removing them, and finally they would vomit bile and die, since the only remedy, wine, was not to be had." Probably because Marc Antony drank it all.
That thing about the turning the stones and everything else, like, again,
it's really haunting, right?
So haunting. And not to give Caesar another name check, but he was kind of right. The most important thing to do was set up some way of carrying water.
This is an arid environment, and water becomes a big issue pretty quickly.
At one point, Antony was stuck force marching his troops through a mountain range over 30 miles in a single night because some shady Parthians with their bows unstrung told them that this was the safest route. There was no water on this route. The men were trying to carry water in their helmets. That's how thirsty they were. At dawn, they were viciously attacked by Parthians. After that, they came upon a river full of poisoned, salty water. A large number of desperately thirsty troops drank from it and got horrible stomach cramps and died. Things got really bad. At one point, Antony contemplated suicide. Finally, after several debilitating marches through a string of ambushes, Antony and his troops made it to safer ground. He discovered that more than half of his troops had died, about 20,000 infantry and 4,000 cavalry, more from disease than attack. He lost 8,000 more men on a winter march to the sea. Finally, he and his remaining troops reached a little town called White Village, not far from modern-day Beirut, on the coast, and there he sent for Cleopatra.
Plutarch tells us that Antony was desperate for Cleopatra to come. He was, quote, beside himself with distress. He drank heavily, and he couldn't sit down at dinner for 5 minutes before jumping up to run to the beach and see if Cleopatra's sails had yet appeared on the horizon. So when she arrived, Cleopatra found Antony's army in tatters, and Antony huddling in a blanket fort, a wild-eyed, drunken, unshaven, freaked-out mess. She distributed food, clothes, blankets, and supplies to the troops. She tucked Antony in bed with a hot drink and patted his head and said, there, a lot. And Antony started to feel a little better. But she wasn't the only woman who raced to Antony's side to pet and coddle him. Octavia had also heard Antony was in trouble and immediately assembled 2,000 elite bodyguards plus food, armor, clothes, and other much-needed supplies and set sail to go be at her husband's side.
Make no mistake, whether Octavia intended it to be or not, this was yet another ambush. Octavian signed off on this trip. He encouraged his sister to go. He may have even suggested it, and he knew exactly what he was doing, causing a serious optics problem for Marc Antony. He knew Cleopatra had gotten there first, and Antony would not want Octavia to show up on his doorstep. But if Antony sent Octavia away, it would be a deadly insult to Octavia, to her brother, and to the Roman public itself. He'd be repudiating an exemplary Roman wife in favor of that scheming Eastern queen Cleopatra. Feel bad for Octavia here because I'm not 100% sure that she foresaw this outcome, but also I'm not sure Cleopatra's scheming here. Like, she's just going to the father of her 3 children.
Well, the thing is, that's how the Romans saw her. And Octavia, I don't think Octavia was particularly political unless she was extremely velvet gloved. I think this would have been a personal mission for her, but Octavian would be delighted to put Antony in this position.
Women in the position Octavia is in really have to be careful because so much of their safety comes from the men that they're tied to. And when you have men who are maneuvering the way Octavian and Antony are, you find yourself in really hot water. And I really feel like Octavia does fairly well to survive as long as she does. And she does make it to old age, I think.
Oh, yeah, she does. And I think that's a really good point because Octavia refuses to repudiate Antony, but she's also not going against her brother. Like, she's really hedging her bets a lot.
Yeah, I mean, she's playing the game that Cleopatra was playing in the first episode. The stakes for her are just as high as they were for Cleopatra because one wrong move and she could find herself exiled or murdered by either her husband or her brother. And Octavian was ruthless. He exiled his own daughter.
That's like later on in his history. Obviously, we're not going to talk about that now, but he does turn against other family members and you see that throughout his life. So even though he's really close to Octavia, that doesn't necessarily make her safe. And I'm sure she knew that.
Absolutely. So let's move on. Whether or not Antony really understood the trouble he was in right now, Cleopatra smelled the trap immediately. She knew Octavia's visit was a direct challenge to her. And as brilliant of a ruler as she was, Cleo relied on Roman patronage to keep her throne. She had to keep Antony hers. She could not let him start up with Octavia again. So, according to Plutarch at least, she resorted to guilt and tears.
Plutarch says Cleopatra, quote, pretended to be passionately in love with Antony. He doesn't even consider that her feelings might have been genuine here. The ancient sources tell us that Cleopatra stopped eating, she lost weight, she burst into tears at the slightest provocation, and when Antony entered the room, she would try, not that subtly, to hide her sniffles. It's like, what's wrong, babe? Nothing.
You're just gonna put me aside for that Roman woman even though I came here first and I love you and I take care of you and we have 3 children together and you only have 2 with her.
It's nothing, it's fine. Go ahead, take the last light bulb. I'll sit here in the dark.
I've seen this happen before. Caesar did this to me. I thought you were better than Caesar.
I'm still not over it, but I'm totally over it. It's fine.
It's fine. I'm totally cool. I'm a cool girl.
I'm not upset. I'm not upset. I'm not. Ah. So she would look at Antony all dewy-eyed when he was around, like sigh, swoon, and grew inconsolable when he left. And as she was doing all this, the people in her entourage were laying the guilt on thick. They upbraided Antony for being so cruel and hard-hearted as to even consider favoring Octavia over Cleopatra. They reminded him that Octavia had married him because she'd been ordered to, but Cleopatra was with him purely for love. She didn't even have the title of his wife, and she was fine with that. She didn't ask for anything. Cleopatra just gave. Cleopatra asked for nothing and gave everything, they said. All she ever wanted was to be in Antony's presence and gaze adoringly at him. Swoon!
Swoon.
Cleopatra's servants strongly implied that if Antony were to leave her now, she might well waste away and die. And this particular suggestion had to be triggering for Antony because it was exactly what had happened to his last wife, Fulvia, unless she was poisoned, but Antony thought she'd wasted away and died for him.
And that's the important thing. And Antony was a people pleaser, so the guilt offensive worked in spectacular fashion. Some writers have suggested Antony had a little bit of a submissive streak. As big of a war elephant as he was, he loved being scolded and ordered around by a strong woman, which was why he was so attracted to them. But whatever psychosexual dynamics were at play here, Antony's actions speak for themselves. He sent Octavia packing back to Rome with her gifts and went with Cleopatra to Alexandria. And surprising no one, this did not play well in Rome. A similar situation had played out about 5 years ago, when Octavian was at odds with Fulvia, Marc Antony's wife. Octavian had married Fulvia's daughter, Cleopatra, as a way to secure the second triumvirate. But during his conflict with Fulvia, Octavian had sent her back to her mom, saying scornfully that she was still a virgin. It was a stinging rejection of Clodia as a wife, and also a deadly insult to Fulvia. On that pretext, Fulvia declared war against Octavian. Now, Antony was basically pulling the same thing on Octavian, sending his sister back to him, rejecting her, even if his intentions weren't necessarily to reject Octavia per se, even if he'd been emotionally manipulated, even if he was genuinely terrified that the same thing might happen to Cleopatra that had happened to Fulvia if he left her too. This looked really bad to the Roman people. He was throwing off Rome for Egypt. It did not endear him to the Roman public.
Antony had just given Octavian a lot of raw material for his own propaganda campaign. And this was bad because while Antony had been thrashing around in Parthia, just kind of flailing, Octavian had been building up his own power base in Rome to the point where he was dangerous. By this point, the second triumvirate had devolved. While Octavian had been fighting the pirate Sextus Pompey, which he'd been doing while Marc Antony was in Parthia, Lepidus had tried to use the confusion to his advantage and take over Sicily. He and Octavian had an argument over that, at the end of which Octavian stripped Lepidus of all his titles and sent him to live in exile. So the second triumvirate was gone. Octavian now set about raising his social status. On the day his wife Scribonia gave birth to their daughter, because this is just the kind of guy Octavian is, he divorced her to marry a woman named Livia Drusilla. On the day his wife gave birth, he divorced her. Marriage to her aligned Octavian with a very highly placed Claudii family, rocketing him up to the highest echelons of Roman society. Previously, Antony had the better lineage, and this is where the Julio-Claudians come from.
After marrying Livia and doing away with Lepidus, Octavian started to turn the Roman public and senators against Antony. To the senatorial class and the Roman public, Octavian painted Antony as a scoundrel and a womanizer who'd abandoned his virtuous wife in favor of the slutty, scheming Egyptian queen. Eye roll. Octavia wouldn't speak a negative word about Antony when she returned to Rome, even though he'd refused to see her. She'd also refused to leave Antony's house, which would have amounted to repudiating him in public. She begged her brother not to start a war with Antony over her. She definitely did not want to be the new Helen of Troy, a woman two powerful men went to war over.
I definitely think the lady doth protest too much here.
Well, I have some thoughts about this. So the thing about Octavia here is because she's still married to Antony, she gets to live in his house. She's not under the rule of her brother or her husband. She's got a lot of freedom. Yes, she's raising almost an orphanage of Antony's children at this point in time, but
we should do like the count of children now in Octavia's house.
She's got 2 with Antony.
Antony and Fulvia's kids are there, and I think she's got 3 of her own kids with Marcellus, which was her previous husband.
And does she have any of Antony's or his first wife?
So there's Antonia Prima, who was Antony's daughter with his very first wife, or his second wife or something. And she, I believe, is married by now. And this count, like, some of these kids are older. They married them super young at like 14 or something. So I don't know exactly how many were definitely living in Octavia's house at any one time.
Yeah, and remember, I mean, she had a lot of people doing a lot of work for her. She wasn't doing night feedings or anything like that.
Yeah.
She had a lot of freedom, and being married gave her some protection she wouldn't have had as a single woman, especially if she was back under her brother's roof. So it's possible that she actually didn't mind the situation. Maybe she took a couple lovers.
What's interesting here is how much strategy Jen is seeing in Octavia's behavior, because she's painted as such a guileless, perfect, butter wouldn't melt in her mouth woman. But actually, if you look a little closer, there is quite a bit of strategy in what she does.
Yeah, and again, I'm thinking back to that arc on the Julian Claudians in the ancient world Stark family, and I'm thinking back to how I felt about Agrippina the Younger after her sister is murdered. And what I found about that is, in order to play this game, sometimes you have to just be incredibly quiet and you get what you want. We see this later with, I believe it's Octavia's granddaughters or daughters who play this game and live into their 80s and don't want to get remarried.
Mm-hmm.
But Octavian was happy to use his sister's public rejection as a pretext, loudly lamenting how Antony had humiliated her. And he loudly accused Antony of, quote, going native, a racist colonialist term that referred to colonizers adopting the customs of the people they were colonizing, which was seen as uncivilized and generally a bad thing to the Romans, and still a horrible racist colonialist term.
I mean, present day and past tense, but when Romans came and took over a community, like when they conquered and colonized a different culture, they saw themselves as being a civilizing force and saw imposing Roman culture as a good thing. And it wasn't supposed to work the other way around.
No, I mean, they were supposed to indoctrinate the people who they colonized into their culture. And the Romans were actually really good at this. It's why you see a lot of, when we talk about things like Saturnalia and different Roman festivals, you see a lot of other people's cultures mixed in, because the Romans were like, okay, well, we're not going to say you can't have this festival. We're just going to rename it with one of our gods, take the stuff you like about it, put in some stuff we like.
Totally appropriate and recontextualize this festival in a Roman way so that no matter what you do, even when you try to celebrate your own festivals and holidays, you're being Roman.
Exactly.
But at the moment, Antony shrugged all this off that Octavian was saying about him in Rome. Octavian could talk until he was blue in the face, and he probably was, honestly, right this minute, blue in the face. But the people of Rome did not want another civil war. Octavian was just a 28-year-old kid who kept calling in sick to his own battles. If he ever shut his mouth for long enough to get an army together, Antony would worry then. In 35 BC, Antony went back to Alexandria with Cleopatra. She was around 34 years old at this point, and he was about 48. And this was exactly where Cleopatra wanted him, at her side, spending time with her and their 3 kids, Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and now little Ptolemy Philadelphus, his new son. They're a family. Parthia had been Marc Antony's first real military defeat, and it had been a big, disastrous one. Antony decided he needed a victory. Nothing too big or ambitious, but something he literally could not fuck up.
Oh boy, has he met himself?
I know. Has he met himself? And something he could use to keep his men loyal, because keeping the troops loyal is all about giving them victories and opportunities to plunder. So a few months after going back to Alexandria, he started looking around for an easy target.
He settled on the king of Armenia, Artavasdes. He had been one of those allies who'd promised but never delivered troops and supplies to Antony while he was in Parthia. So a little bit of a grudge here. Now, Antony sent a message to him proposing a royal marriage. How about Artavasdes betroth his daughter to 6-year-old Alexander Helios?
I mean, Alexander Helios is single.
He's single. He's 6. He's ready to mingle.
So ready to mingle. I literally can't see how this would possibly go wrong.
Listen, he's prepared to put his Legos down and come over a-courtin'.
He's so cute. His little courtin' outfit. It's like he's got his little Caligula boots on. Yeah, we don't approve of child marriage. We're just going to put that out there, in case you were wondering.
It was a betrothal, not a marriage. So there's no way he would be married before the age of majority when he could actually marry her. It's just a long engagement. This betrothal would have been a big deal, and it would have cemented a peace between them. So Artavasdes saying no, well, that's a problem.
Oh man, Antony sent him like the cute little postcard with the cute little kids and circled Alexander Helios and was like, how about this one? And Artavasdes was just not having it. Nope.
Oh. So Antony sees this opportunity to be mortally insulted. I am mortally insulted. Honor is at stake.
Honor was at stake.
Artavasdes turned down that offer, as Antony knew he would, because it was a trap. Antony declared war, and unlike the Parthian War, this one was easy. Antony marched his legions in, beat up on the Armenians, helped himself to Artavasdes' loot, and dragged Artavasdes and his whole family back to Alexandria to walk in a triumph, or a walk of shame for the people who were conquered. And what a triumph Cleopatra threw for him. Antony rode in a lavish chariot wearing his purple cloak up the Sphinx-lined Canopic Avenue to present his royal prisoners, Artavasdes and his wife and kids, to Cleopatra in chains. Cleopatra received them, decked out in her most elaborate ceremonial Isis costume, atop a golden throne raised on a silver platform thronged by worshipful subjects. King Artavasdes was proud. He refused to bow to Cleopatra or use her royal titles, a deadly insult. But Cleo got over it quickly, moving on to the lavish feasting and partying.
The celebrations went on for several days. Toward the end, in a massive spectacle in the public gymnasium, Antony showered Cleopatra and their children with territories in a paroxysm of generosity, later referred to as the donations of Alexandria. Alexander Helios got Medea, Armenia, and Parthia, which Antony didn't even control.
Which Antony had not successfully conquered.
Don't know how that worked. It's like marched right in there, like, I came, I saw, I flailed.
That is really the story of Antony.
Anyway, Ptolemy Philadelphus, who was about 2 years old at this point, got Cilicia, Phoenicia, and Syria. To Cleopatra Selene went the Greek settlement of Cyrene. Caesarion got acknowledged as the natural son of Caesar. And Antony issued new coins with Cleopatra's face on them. She became the first foreign woman with her face on a Roman coin. Which always happens.
Oh my God.
I mean, look, it's not an ancient history fangirl episode if somebody doesn't get their face on a Roman coin for the first time.
Especially if it's a woman.
Yeah, but it turned out that as lavish as his gifts were to Cleopatra and their children that day, the biggest gift Antony gave was all the propaganda material he dropped in Octavian's lap.
There were a ton of things wrong with the donations from a Roman perspective. First off, triumphs were not supposed to be celebrated in a foreign country. They were supposed to be granted by the Senate and celebrated only in Rome. Cleopatra certainly did not have the authority to grant one. Second, why was Antony showering all the gold and treasure he'd acquired in Armenia on Cleopatra, a foreign ruler, rather than the people of Rome?
Yeah, why is Cleopatra getting all this loot?
Exactly. It's not like she's been bankrolling you for years and years and years, and maybe, just maybe, this is one time she doesn't have to devalue her currency because you've won something.
I mean, I'm sure the Romans were not thinking of that, Jen.
No. Third, Antony was getting really, really above himself. This whole thing about the new Dionysus was kind of fun when it was just at parties, but now he was dressing as Dionysus before cheering crowds at official functions in Egypt, while sitting on a gleaming golden throne alongside his Egyptian mistress, dressed as the goddess Isis. Even their kids got their own tiny golden thrones. Julius Caesar had been stabbed to death for less. Also, Antony had just declared 13-year-old Caesarion the official son of Caesar, which was threatening to Octavian. One of the things that kept Octavian's troops loyal was that they saw him as the most legitimate heir of Caesar. If Caesar really did have a natural son out there, that challenged Octavian's position.
Over in Rome, Octavian kicked his propaganda machine up a notch. Just look at Marc Antony, he said, styling himself a king and god, sitting on a golden throne, throwing himself a parade that to all intents and purposes looks like an insulting mockery of a Roman triumph, and doling out Roman territories to a foreign ruler and her children. Antony was being obnoxious and arrogant in the best light. In the worst, this was a power play, a really bold and obvious one. Antony was practically begging Rome to declare war. It's not likely Antony meant to send that message. There was a lot of wishful thinking going on with the donations. Antony was handing out territories that in many cases he didn't even control, including Parthia, which he definitely did not control, to kids aged 6 and 2. These were basically fantasy kingdoms. He probably saw the entire event in a completely different light than the one Octavius shone on it. He even sent letters to the Senate announcing his donations and asking for ratification, like he expected everyone would be totally fine with what he was doing and maybe even applaud him. But we don't know how he was seeing it because the propaganda is what's come down to us.
Antony could have probably solved this problem by heading back to Rome after the donations and telling the Romans his side of the story. After all, a lot of people in Rome still loved Marc Antony. As skilled as Octavian was at spinning things, nobody really liked Octavian on a personal level. All Antony had to do was roll back into town, hand out some of his awesome bear hugs and manly down-to-earth charm, somehow refrain from starting any riots.
I mean, that one might be a tall ask.
That is a tall order. He just had to show everyone that he was still on top, have a couple of beers, give them some of the gold he's won from invading Armenia.
Well, the thing about Marc Antony is that he's the guy that you want to have a beer with.
He's the kind of politician you see who you're like, yeah, I want to have a beer with that guy. I like that guy. I think that guy gets me.
The only thing about Marc Antony is he's got that crazy sense of humor, right? I've been thinking about his sense of humor. We see him doing things like playing mean practical jokes on his wife Fulvia, letting her think that he's dead, and going around Alexandria Alexandria pretending to be like ordinary guy and spying on people and laughing about it. And it's like, this is a guy who has had 0 checks on his behavior for all of his life. No one's ever said, "That's not funny, Antony, stop it," to Antony. So I kind of feel like saying that he's the likable one. It's like, well, yeah, at a certain point, he definitely is the likable one, but there's also this other side of Marc Antony where he's just a privilege monster.
I think the reason that Marc Antony is so likable is because Marc Antony is fallible. Marc Antony fucks up constantly, and I feel like he must have been really great at being like, yeah, Parthia was a really bad idea. Like, just owned it and was the kind of person who owns their mistakes, makes a joke out of it, and you feel more comfortable around them. And Octavian was the complete opposite. Also a privilege monster, but Octavian was the guy who, by the time he becomes Augustus, no one is allowed to say a shit word about him. And remember, when Caesar died, Antony was the one who rallied the common people to riot, and he was the person that the common people thought was speaking for them. And then he kind of just fucked off to Parthia, and now is acting like the new Dionysus and wearing a purple robe, and he's gone.
Cleopatra had that effect on people because she had Caesar thinking he was going to be a god. I think that it was part of her allure. While you're with Cleopatra, you feel like a god, and then you start carrying that into other areas of your life.
Exactly.
And he's totally not understanding how his behavior is playing to people, and I think that is part of his privilege.
Absolutely. So instead of going back to Rome and smoothing things out and doing all the bear hugs and drinking late at the taverns and giving out his gold, Antony stayed in Alexandria with Cleopatra for another winter and another. For the next few years, Antony threw himself into Alexandrian life. He sat by Cleopatra's side, cheering her as she adjudicated disputes, oversaw festivals, and made the economic and administrative decisions that kept Egypt afloat. For all intents and purposes, he was her consort and the father of her children, and he was home.
Yeah, he was. And I think that there's something really sweet here about Marc Antony being a really supportive house husband to an ambitious wife.
Absolutely. Like, this is one of those moments where, like, do you love him a little bit? You don't get the sense, and again, this is propaganda. Maybe he was terribly bored with this, but you don't get the sense that he was. He was like, hey, I spent all of my life, I've had all these children, like 8 of them maybe, or 6 of them, or however many. I've never actually seen what a 2-year-old looks like and how much fun they are. And I've never been in one place long enough to, like, I don't know, put down some of my treasure for my campaigns. I've never had the freedom to be happy, to be a family man.
I think deep down, he doesn't really want to rule. Like, whenever we see him being the number one and making decisions, he flails, right?
He flails. He's terrible at it. What Marc Antony wants is he wants to give you his good idea. He wants you to pat him on the head. And if it is actually a good idea, you enact it so he doesn't have to.
And also, I think he likes, this life that Cleopatra's giving him. Like, he wants to drink in the taverns and wander around Alexandria like a common person and preside over festivals and judge athletic competitions and like be declared the new Dionysus and not work that hard. And Cleopatra just runs things behind the scenes. At the same time, she creates this amazing life for Antony where he doesn't do any of the work and she just, manages everything. And I think that this is just like his natural environment. He's going to be the most happy here.
I mean, here's the thing. I think this is the first time Marc Antony gets to be kind of a celebrity who doesn't have to work hard at being Marc Antony. Like, he doesn't have to prove again and again that he's a great general, that he's excellent on campaign, that everyone loves him. He just gets to be like, I'm going to judge some athletic competitions. I'm going to do some of these ceremonial things. I'm going to wear my Dionysus robe. Everyone knows me here in Alexandria. I'm Marc Antony and they love me. Imagine how that must feel. Like, in Rome, you're constantly proving yourself. You're only as good as your last military campaign or senatorial speech or what have you. And here, he's just Marc Antony. He gets to be a celebrity.
I mean, I can see the allure.
Oh, I can totally see the allure.
So this is what Marc Antony was up to in Alexandria.
Just fucking about like he did in Athens.
It might be impossible to believe that relations between Octavian and Antony could possibly get any worse, but they did. For the next few years, Octavian and Marc Antony continued to yell at each other from opposite sides of the Mediterranean. It wasn't all athletic contests and spying on people in Alexandria, Jen, and being the new Dionysus. It was also a lot of yelling at Octavian across the Mediterranean.
I mean, I kind of feel like the only way you can have an actually good functioning relationship with Octavian is to put the Mediterranean between you.
And even then,
you have to yell sometimes.
So Octavian accused Antony of setting himself up as a king and god in Egypt. Kind of a point to Octavian there. Antony offered to relinquish all his power in Rome and restore the Republic if Octavian would do the same, and Octavian declined. Oh, that's wily, Antony. I bet Antony was like up all night thinking of that one.
I bet Antony was like really trying to puzzle it out, and Cleopatra was like, hang on, Antony, just do this. Because it really cost Antony nothing. Like, I don't think at this point in time he had any desire to come back into Rome, but it would cost Octavian everything to deny that. Octavian demanded that Antony share his spoils from Armenia with the Roman public. Antony countered that Octavian hadn't even bothered to send the troops he'd promised at Tarentum. Octavian accused Antony of murdering Sextus, and Antony countered that Sextus had been executed for rebelling on Octavian's orders. All right, Antony, that's some good shots fired.
The invective got personal. Antony brought up Octavian's humble roots and his tendency to skip his battles. The skipping the battles hits home. Octavian called Antony a drunkard. I mean,
Octavian, everyone knows he's a drunkard. They've literally nicknamed him the god of wine and debauchery. Come on.
Antony countered that people had to drink around Octavian just to stand him. I mean, point to Antony. Antony accused Octavian of withholding land grants for his soldiers in Italy. Octavian responded sarcastically that Antony was welcome to dole out land from his conquests in Parthia. Oh! Sick burn, Octavian.
Oh boy, can you imagine how much Cleopatra must have had to calm him down after that one?
Oh, it's getting heated up in here.
Open a window. Octavian called Antony past his prime a has-been.
That's below the belt.
That is ageist, and I am not settling for that, Octavian.
We're not here for your ageism, Octavian.
Antony accused Octavian of sleeping with Julius Caesar to get into his will.
Possible.
I mean, it's the Julian Claudians. That's not the worst incest we're gonna see from them. Antony reminded everyone of Octavian's humble roots and that there was a genuine son of Caesar in Alexandria, one whose face didn't make you want to punch it every time you saw it.
Octavian shot back that Cleopatra had slept with everyone but Julius Caesar.
Oh!
And that Caesarion was definitely not Caesar's son. Ouch!
Wow.
Antony snarled that Octavian was in the habit of kidnapping and assaulting virgins. He brought up Octavian's alleged nasty habit of carrying off other people's wives during dinner parties and returning them to the table with their clothes on crooked and their hair messed up. Ew!
Ew, but also Julian Claudian Playbook 101.
Right, I don't know if this actually happened. I'm not sure where Antony's getting this. I wouldn't put it past Octavian. On and on and on and on and on. The accusations of effeminacy, cowardice, bad hygiene, drunkenness, sexual deviance, and all kinds of other insults flew fast and furious, all in front of a rapt audience of basically the entire city of Rome.
And you can see later on why it became so important for Octavian to change his persona. I mean, can you imagine you're coming to power just slinging garbage about both you and your opponent back and forth?
I mean, it's one of those things that just makes everyone involved look bad.
Exactly. So it was a great time to be a satirist, a graffiti artist, or a scurrilous poem writer, or a pamphleteer in ancient Rome, because suddenly there was a lot of work to be had. Octavian and Antony were the two biggest clients in town. Soon, the two were hiring people to paper the streets of Rome with pamphlets and poems and handbills denouncing each other. Vicious graffiti sprang up on the walls of buildings. Incidentally, Octavian brought up Antony's drunken buffoonery so much that Antony felt the need to publish a pamphlet called On His Drunkenness, defending himself against charges of being drunk literally all the time.
If the shoe fits.
Look, Antony, don't feed the troll.
No doubt, Cleopatra just rolled her eyes at all of this.
This is just two men fighting back and forth, and Cleopatra's like, I have an entire country to run, a country that gives this other country most of its wealth. I'm not going to get involved in this pissing contest.
So, meanwhile, money and resources rolled into Alexandria from all the territories Antony had bestowed on her, which she used to build up her army and navy. Suddenly, Egypt was starting to look militarily dangerous again, and that was making Rome twitchy. Finally, Antony was ready to start things up again in Parthia. It was 33 BC. It had been 2 years since his last attempt, in which he flailed terribly and slunk off home with his tail between his legs. He and Cleopatra traveled to Ephesus in Greece, where together they started assembling an army. Once again, Antony brutally taxed his eastern provinces for both money and conscripts, but Cleopatra contributed far more, a vast amount of money, troops, and ships. It was starting to look like a reprise of Marc Antony's last time in Greece about 2 years ago. The wine flowed, the dancers danced in the streets of Ephesus, flute music echoed off the mountains, epic feasts were thrown. Everyone hailed Marc Antony as the new Dionysus and Cleopatra as the new Isis. It was just like before, except this time, with Cleopatra by his side, everything would turn out differently.
But a few months after they arrived, reality came knocking in the form of about 300 senators who'd fled Rome. They had news. Octavian had staged a coup. The coup had gone down like this. While he had been living in Alexandria and waging his war of words with Octavian, Antony had also been taking a page from Caesar's playbook. He'd left senators loyal to him in Rome to make sure that Octavian never built up too much real power. But in January of 32 BC, a new pro-Antony consul had trashed Octavian to his face. Octavian retaliated by storming the Senate House at the head of a group of armed guards, intimidating the pro-Antony faction into silence. He announced he had some damning evidence against Marc Antony, which he planned to reveal in due time. The pro-Antony senators knew better than to wait around for that. They fled to Greece and Antony.
Antony was now in a very bad position in Rome. His supporters in the Senate had been driven out. War, the senators warned him, was all but inevitable if he didn't ditch Cleopatra immediately and work on repairing his image and building up support in Rome again. They strongly advised him to send Cleopatra back to Egypt, and at first Antony agreed. But Cleopatra wasn't going to go meekly back to Alexandria, and you can't blame her. The last time Marc Antony had left her in Alexandria to go patch things up with Octavian, he'd wound up married to someone else. He was officially still married to that someone else, by the way. If Cleopatra allowed herself to be sent home, it was highly likely Antony would wind up in settled domesticity with his other family again, Octavia and their 2 daughters. She could not let him out of her sight. On a certain level, she can't trust Marc Antony, right?
Yeah, she absolutely can't trust Marc Antony. I mean, Marc Antony's problem here is he's been in Egypt for a long time and he's enjoying his life and possibly really desperately in love with Cleopatra. And he kind of still wants to keep one foot in Rome, but he's also really aware that Rome is a hot mess and, what am I doing this for?
But on the other hand, Antony's power in Rome is the reason Cleopatra has her throne. Like, if she wasn't backed by a powerful Roman ruler, she could be facing a lot more insurrection at home. So, on some level, he kind of needs to keep power in Rome in order to maintain their life there.
Exactly. And I think that's part of Antony's problem. I see this a lot being an expat. There's a big part of you that's really tied to your home country, but you're in this new country and you've been there for a while and that's kind of where your life is. And when these 300 senators come knocking on his door and they're like, Antony, you have to get back. The country needs you. This is really important. He's of this mind of like, I have to go back. I have to do this. This is where I'm supposed to be.
And the thing is too about people pleasing. Like, I was in this relationship once with someone who I would call a people pleaser who exhibits like a lot of Marc Antony like traits. I don't lump everyone who identifies that way in.
Yeah, and I also think you have a tendency to people please. Not everyone is a people pleaser all the time.
Of course. So I had this relationship with this person who would do things like I see Marc Antony doing here to Cleo, where in my experience it looked like this. I'd be like, I really wish that your mom could like maybe get a hotel room instead of coming to stay with us every weekend for the next month. Just like maybe we could do like 2 weekends a month she stays here and 2 weekends a month you go visit her or she gets a hotel room or something, but this is really hard on me. And my partner would be like, oh yeah, sure, totally. I totally understand. And then he'd talk to his mom later that night and then he'd be like, so my mom's staying with us all month. And like, I'd just be like, what just happened there?
Sure. And I mean, I have had people pleasing tendencies most of my life. I'm married to someone who is wonderful, but he's not a people pleaser. And I obviously host a podcast with someone who's wonderful, but not a people pleaser.
Definitely not.
As someone who people pleases, what you're trying to do constantly is compromise. You're trying to make sure that everyone can be okay with the situation. And the problem with that is it took me a lot of time. It took me being married to my husband and having Jenny as a close friend to really build boundaries. Someone who has people pleasing tendencies, it's really hard to build those boundaries. I mean, I've been married a long time. It took me probably the first 6 years of our marriage to learn how to do it. And you have to stick to it. That's the other thing, because there's this part of you that's like, oh, I don't want this person to be mad and maybe I'll just like give a little bit on this, and you can't. But when you're dealing with people who are not people pleasers, you have to remember that sometimes you can't give for what they want. You have to make them bend a little bit. And the problem Antony has here, and where I'd say he's got a real fail, is he should have gone back to Rome, even though Cleopatra didn't want him to go.
He goes back there. He's got a whole other family there. It's not like he's just there by by himself.
The problem with Marc Antony is he is a privilege monster. But there's a part of him that's like, well, definitely be back. Cleo's my main squeeze. But also, like, I could chill in Rome for a couple of years. Octavia's aging like a fine wine. I like it. I got a couple kids. And Cleopatra is kind of like, if you go back there, you're not going to come back to me.
So Cleopatra was stuck in this crap situation with Marc Antony. All his senator friends who'd just come from Rome were urging him to get rid of her, to come back to Rome. So she enlisted one of her generals, a guy named Canidius, to speak on her behalf. Canidius slung an arm around Antony's shoulder, pulled him aside, and gave him a man-to-man talking to. He said, look, getting rid of Cleopatra would be shooting yourself in the foot, buddy. Cleopatra's the one bankrolling your army. She's the one your navy is loyal to. What do you think it would do to their morale if you were to just summarily dismiss their queen? Besides, rejecting his Eastern mistress would send a very bad message indeed to his other Eastern allies.
Meanwhile, Cleopatra demanded angrily for Antony to explain to her how she was, and this is a quote from Plutarch, inferior in intelligence to any one of the princes who took part in the expedition. She, who for a long time had governed so large a kingdom by herself, and by long association with Antony had learned to manage large affairs. What she's reminding him is, number one, I ruled on my own for a long time. Number two, I'm not a liability. I control like the richest area in the empire. I control the grain. Like, I know what I'm doing. I've been with you now for like quite a long time. I've picked up a few tricks.
Well, that is totally her buttering him up. She knows exactly what to say to him to get him on side.
That's her stage managing him. So Plutarch tells us that behind the scenes, Cleopatra had bribed Canidius to stand up for her. And actually, this may be the truth. Modern archaeologists found a piece of papyrus dated February 33 BC. It had been used to wrap a mummy. It granted lucrative tax exemptions to someone named Canidius. At the bottom, in handwriting distinct from the rest of the document, is a phrase in Greek that means, make it so, or so be it. Because the Ptolemies always personally signed their official documents to prevent forgeries, this is extremely likely to be the only example of Cleopatra's handwriting ever found.
As he always did with Cleopatra, Antony caved. Cleopatra got to stay. And not long after the senator's defection, the couple sailed from Ephesus to Athens to continue their preparations for war in Parthia. So the last time Antony had been in Athens, he'd been with his wife, Octavia. The reminders of that visit were all over the city. The people of Athens had loved Octavia, if you recall. They declared her the new Athena. There were statues of her and Antony up all over the city, dressed in their godly regalia. Everyone still had fond memories of Octavia's visit, which they brought up constantly. Oh, do you remember that one time Octavia was in town?
Oh my God, we had such a good time. And did you see her earrings? I mean, oh, those pearls.
I know, Octavia, she's so good at just, everything. She's just so good at things.
She's so good. She's so clever. She's so nice. And you know what? She's like fancy without being over the top fancy.
Right. She doesn't make a whole thing of it. You just know she's fancy. You just know it. Unlike some.
Even when she's just wearing like a normal hala, it's like high quality, but it's not gaudy.
She's not flaunting her wealth. It's so nice of her.
It's so refreshing.
So Cleopatra took one look around at all this nonsense and went, no. She immediately went on a bedazzle and charm offensive, showering the people of Athens with money, feasts, and parties, pulling out all the stops to erase Octavia's memory forever. And it worked. Before long, the people were pulling down statues of Octavia and putting up statues of Cleopatra. Of course it worked. She's a Ptolemy.
The populace voted to shower honors on Cleopatra in return and sent a group of its leading citizens, including Antony, who'd been made an honorary citizen of Athens in his last visit, to visit her lavish guest house and bring her these honors. Antony called her down, stood next to her on the stoop, and delivered a speech praising her to the skies in front of Athens' leading citizens. Lots of accounts come down to us of Antony's besotted behavior toward Cleopatra in Athens during this time. He'd always been in love with Cleopatra, but now he was either extra besotted or he had something to prove after having almost allowed himself to be convinced to send her home. In Athens, Antony fawned over Cleopatra. He gave her lavish gifts, honors, and awards, including the entire contents of the Library of Pergamum, which was over 200,000 volumes, because Cleopatra, like me, was a book nerd or scroll nerd.
She loved books, which probably would have been scrolls at the time.
Yeah. One time, in front of an entire banquet hall, he gave Cleopatra a foot massage because he'd lost some bet with her. They were always like betting all kinds of weird shit.
He compelled people to salute her as his royal mistress. When Antony was dispensing justice at the tribunals, Cleopatra would send him love notes inscribed on tablets of onyx and crystal. I love that her love notes are on onyx and crystal tablets, which he would stop his official business to read, no doubt with a goofy grin on his face. Once, when a famous orator was speaking in the forum, Cleopatra passed by in a litter, and Antony leaped up from his seat, racing out of the building to follow after her. In practical, unromantic Rome, where people were laughed at for being too into their spouses, everyone thought this was pathetic.
Ugh.
Does Julius Caesar have something to share with the group?
Julius Caesar can stay quiet no longer. Julius Caesar cannot believe the disgrace Antony made of himself, chasing after the Lady Cleopatra like a lovesick teenager.
Come on, Julius Caesar, you would have done the same thing. She's worth it, right?
Julius Caesar would not have made such a fool of himself in front of everyone. That's not how a Roman woos a woman.
Oh, really? How does a Roman woo a woman, Julius Caesar?
With poetry, Miss Williamson, with beautiful, articulate verse.
Do you have some articulate verse that you'd like to share with the group?
You're not ready for my verse.
Oh, I'm so ready. I'm so ready for your verse, Julius Caesar.
You must promise that you will tell no one of this.
I'll tell no one but the maybe 3,000 odd people listening to this podcast. How about that?
Well, you can take this out in editing, right?
I mean, I could. That doesn't mean I will. Ask Chen about that.
I mean, Cucullin exists for that reason.
She was like, you're going to edit out all of Cucullin, right? And I was like, no, this is gold. Come on, Julius Caesar, don't be a chicken.
Julius Caesar is not a chicken. I am the man who crossed the Rubicon with an army. Not afraid to read some poetry to a sort of a little girl.
All right, prove it.
All right. Julius Caesar wandered lonely as a cloud. His Lady Cleopatra was nowhere to be found. She'd strayed from the path that was right into the arms of a scoundrel by night. Julius Caesar wandered lonely as a cloud, lost from his love, sorrow abound.
Isn't that plagiarized from somewhere?
He totally ripped it off.
Wordsworth,
Julius Caesar knows nothing about plagiarism. Julius Caesar lived in the BCs.
I suspect Julius Caesar has the internet, though, because Julius Caesar watches HBO Now a lot.
Julius Caesar does not know a Wordsworth. You certainly didn't have tea with him last week. Maybe said Wordsworth took Julius Caesar's words for his own.
I strongly suspect that's not the case, because your poetry didn't really come down to us. A lot of people say that's the best thing about your poetry is that it wasn't preserved.
Well, that is scandalous, Miss Williamson.
I know. I'm so mean to you. What are you going to do about it?
I shall go now and watch Tiny Home Nation, and then I shall come back in a few episodes' time and talk about how I will crucify you like I did those pirates, the last people who had the nerve to criticize my poetry.
Okay, well, I'm not going to hold my breath for that, Julius Caesar.
He's gone, Jenny.
Does he really watch Tiny Home Nation?
I can hear the theme song to Tiny Home Nation, actually.
Oh my God, Julius Caesar has branched out from Game of Thrones.
He also, nailed it. He's totally branched out. He's an excellent baker, but he mostly makes cakes of himself.
What is it, like giant Julius Caesar-shaped cakes?
Yes.
You know, that's a lot of fondant. I wonder where he gets fondant in the afterlife. Okay, so before Julius Caesar completely derailed us, we were talking about how Antony was shamelessly fawning over Cleopatra in Alexandria, and how everyone in Rome thought that was really pathetic. But consider your source here. Most of this is from intel brought to Octavian from Antony's enemies, because as many people defected from Octavian to Antony, there was also a steady stream going the other way around. Friends of Marc Antony's who could tell which way the political tides were turning and had decided for whatever reason that Octavian was a surer bet.
There's actually a clue that Antony was not completely off his rocker over Cleopatra, or at least with the presence of mind not to appear that way. At some point during all this, Antony wrote Octavian a private letter in which he doesn't come off as a man who's lost his mind. He does come off as kind of a dick. He makes light of his relationship with Cleopatra and overall sounds kind of bewildered by Octavian's viciousness over the whole thing. There are lots of translations of this letter, and this version comes from Goldsworthy's Antony and Cleopatra. It captures the bluntness and vulgarity with which Antony wrote. So here it is, Marc Antony talking to Octavian. Quote, "Why have you changed? Is it because I'm screwing the queen?"
such an Antony thing to say. Is it because I'm screwing the queen?
He's such a dick. Is she my wife? Have I just started this, or has it been going on for 9 years? How about you? Is it only Livia you screw?
What is this? What is this?
What is this? Antony!
It's just such locker room talk. I mean, people in lockers don't actually talk this way. In locker rooms to people in lockers. What the fuck am I even saying?
It's been a long time with Antony and you're drunk.
We're going back to who people are screwing in this letter.
So, congratulations. If when you read this letter, you have not been inside Tertula or Tarantula or Raphylla or Salvia Titisenium. Titisenium.
What? Who the fuck are these people?
I have no idea. They must be like either women he's screwed or high-ranking women of society. So he finishes his letter with, does it really matter where or in whom you dip your wick? I mean...
Marc Antony, you're such a gentleman.
I just want to punch him.
So we just want to punch everyone in this episode now. So that one phrase, is she my wife? That has driven historians nuts for centuries. In the Latin, it can be translated as either is she my wife as a question or she is my wife as a statement. And I've seen it translated as both. A lot of modern historians go with the question version because of the sentence structure. It's surrounded by other bluntly stated rapid-fire questions. Stylistically, I guess it makes sense as a question, but that doesn't mean it is a question. It's kind of tangential there. But there's no proof Antony and Cleopatra were ever officially married that I know of. They could have been, but if they had been, chances are it would have been a massive ceremony and everyone would have heard about it. And Octavian doesn't mention it in his propaganda. And he absolutely would have used that against Antony, especially if he married Cleopatra while he was still married to Octavia.
But whether or not Antony and Cleopatra were officially married, one thing was for sure. Antony and Octavia were over. Because around this time in 32 BC, Antony divorced Octavia for good. She'd been living in his house, caring for one of his sons with Fulvia, as well as their 2 daughters together and her own 3 kids with Marcellus.
What's the count of kids in Octavia's household now? 1 kid from Antony and Fulvia, 2 daughters from Antony and Octavia, that's 3, and then 3 kids with Marcellus. That's 6 kids living in Octavia's house.
Living in Octavia's home for wayward children.
Which was also Antony's house in Rome.
Which actually makes total sense, because he is the biggest wayward child of them all.
Totally.
That was 6 children in total, who, as far as I knew, were living in Antony's house in Rome with Octavia until Antony divorced Octavia. Finally, Octavia would have to leave his house. So Octavia gathered her brood and left, weeping and fretting once again about being a woman who caused a war. And Octavian wanted Antony's head on a plate.
But here's the thing. As vicious as the war of words had been between Octavian and Antony so far, it was just that, a war of words. The public didn't want another civil war just so Octavian could settle his personal beef with Marc Antony. People weren't entirely convinced Antony had done anything in particular to go to war over. And Octavian might have been the power in Rome at the moment, but he wasn't the emperor yet, and he couldn't go to war without public and Senate approval. So once again, Octavian kicked his propaganda machine up yet another notch, because if you thought there wasn't another notch, we were at the top notch, there's more notches, you guys. But this time, instead of demonizing Marc Antony, he focused on emasculating him. Antony was whipped, he said. Look at how he massaged Cleopatra's feet at banquets and trailed after her litter like a lovesick puppy. Look at how he botched his own Parthia campaign so he could go home sooner with Cleopatra, refused Roman summons to stay in Alexandria, even given up his post as consul the day he'd been granted it. In 34 BC, Antony had been granted the position of consul in absentia. He was busy being Dionysus in Alexandria at the time, so he passed it up.
Surprise, surprise. Antony doesn't want to go to work when he could just be drinking in Alexandria. I mean, I can't really blame him there.
Right.
Once again, Antony's friends urged him privately to rethink his relationship with Cleopatra. She was a major political liability, and the situation was becoming more and more untenable. And eventually, some of Antony's friends who were still in Rome, there were, like 2 of those left, sent a guy named Gabinius to try and talk some sense into him. Cleopatra, who was so widely known for her hospitality, was less than hospitable to Gabinius. She suspected he'd been sent by Octavia to undermine her. At dinner, she seated him at the kids' table and degraded him with insults and sarcasm. She made him the butt of jokes. Finally, she stood up and demanded, in the midst of a drunken, riotous crowd, that Gabinius come out with his purpose for being there.
Frostily, Gabinius replied that it was probably better to talk about this when everyone was sober, but he couldn't resist adding that things would be better all around if Antony would send her packing back to Egypt. I mean, that is not waiting until everyone is sober, Gabinius.
No, it is not.
Antony was furious, but Cleopatra's response was even more chilling. She complimented Geminius for his honesty and thanked him for not making her torture the truth out of him. Geminius wasn't an idiot. He fled back to Rome immediately afterward. Another person to leave Cleopatra's court for Octavian's was a guy named Plancus. Plancus had been in Antony's inner circle for years and was a key founding member of the inimitable, did I say that right? Inimitable livers. He'd been the one to stop Cleopatra from dissolving her second earring at the most expensive banquet in the world. At one memorable banquet in Alexandria, he'd shown up painted blue, wearing nothing but a fishtail and a reed crown.
As you do.
And to the great amusement of the diners, he'd done his best impression of a sea nymph, which involved a lot of wriggling around on the floor. He had a weird sense of humor.
Well, you kind of feel like Plancus is either the kind of guy who spent a lot of time working on those abs and he wants everyone to see him, or he's the kind of guy who spent no time working on his abs and is super confident with his body and wants everyone to see it. Like, either way, I approve.
Jen's into it.
I kind of am. Anyone who's got the guts to, like, be totally naked and decide they're going to put on a fishtail and wriggle around in front of me, I mean, okay.
I know the way to your heart now, Jen.
But you can't talk to me because you're not wearing underwear.
Oh, right. So you just can't say anything. Silent. Utterly silent, butt-naked wriggling. And Jen will be down.
Nope. Silent.
Anyway, so now the butt-naked, blue-painted, floor-wriggling good time was over. We don't know why Plancus switched sides and returned to Rome, but he did, and he brought with him some serious intel. Plancus had been a witness to Marc Antony's will, and he gave Octavian all the dirt.
The minute he heard what Plancus had to say, Octavian marched to the temple of the Vestal Virgins, wrested Antony's will from them, and read it aloud to a reluctant, uncomfortable Senate. At first, the senators, even pro-Octavian senators, strongly disapproved. This was a violation of norms. A man's will was supposed to be private until after he died. Octavian had severely overstepped in taking the will out in public before its time, and he disobeyed the Vestal Virgins. But as Octavian read, the senators began to grow more and more incensed. Antony's will set the donations in stone, bequeathing a number of Roman territories to Cleopatra's kids. It named Caesarion Julius Caesar's legitimate heir. There were other things in there that were really bad, but what got people riled up the most was the part where Antony requested that if he died in Rome, his body should be buried in Alexandria with Cleopatra. Antony's will seemed to spell out loud and clear where his loyalties lay. And it confirmed, in a document witnessed and ratified and guarded by the Vestal Virgins, that everything Octavian had been saying about him all these years was true. All that stuff about Marc Antony being a dissolute, drunken, incompetent, totally subservient to his Egyptian mistress who cared for Egypt far more than Rome was all true. Who actually seemed to be saying in his will that when he died, large swaths of the Roman Empire were to be transferred to Cleopatra and her children.
Yeah, and that was the big thing. He was basically taking Roman territory and giving it to Egypt.
Yeah, which is horrifying.
From a Roman perspective, yeah.
From an Egyptian perspective, quid's in, but from a Roman perspective, that is awful.
A few years ago, the streets had erupted into riots when Octavian had suggested going to war with Sextus Pompey.
Arr.
And not much had changed since then. The people were tapped out, overtaxed, and sick of war. They would need something really special to convince them, and Octavian gave it to them. Octavian sucked at a lot of things. We've been over that a lot. But he was a master propagandist. This time around, he focused on Cleopatra, that promiscuous, seductive, completely unscrupulous queen who embodied everything the Romans most hated: decadent Easterners, arrogant monarchs, and most of all, women who got above themselves.
Women who had any voice at all and could do anything.
Women were supposed to work through men.
Yeah, or they could be, not working at all and just flopping around looking beautiful.
That's how you get into Jen's heart, by the way. Flop around and look beautiful. Paint yourself blue.
Not necessarily, but I have to give him credit for it. Like, that is a ballsy thing to do.
Oh, it's so much confidence. Absolutely.
So much confidence, whether or not he should have it or shouldn't have it. You know what? Everyone should have that much confidence. Think to yourself, today is the day I'm going to paint myself blue and flop around in a fishtail.
Goddamn right, Jen. Try to have all the confidence of an ancient Roman in blue paint and a fishtail and nothing else.
It's like, hey, I am here. I'm in a fishtail. I'm gonna flop.
Everyone knows exactly who I am in this moment.
And I'm proud and comfortable with who I am in this moment.
So Octavian's invective was on fire here. We're getting back to how Octavian is now focusing his propaganda machine not on Antony but on Cleopatra. Cleopatra had clearly sunk her talons deep into Marc Antony and sucked everything Roman and good out of him. He was nothing but a drunkard, I'm going to keep bringing it up, and an incompetent and a total dupe, made a total shell of his former self by Egyptian sex and drugs. Cleopatra had contaminated him, beguiled him with magic and potions, just as she'd done with Julius Caesar.
All the sex magic.
That's right. She's got the sex magic happening.
And, Octavian added,
because he's not done.
I am not done. Do not try and stop me. I am on fire.
Right.
And, Octavian added, Cleopatra wouldn't stop at dominating Marc Antony. Oh, no.
If you think it stops there, you have got another thing coming.
The talent does not stop with Antony.
It continues.
She wouldn't stop until she had done to all of Rome what she'd done to Antony. Antony had basically promised to make Alexandria the Roman Empire's new capital. The lavish donations Cleopatra had wrung out of him were just the first step in her takeover. Her ultimate aim was to take over Rome. In fact, this very minute, no doubt she was seducing Marc Antony with her sex magic into marching up the Via Sacra with an army in tow. Antony's plan was to grant Cleopatra the city of Rome as one of her territories, just as he'd done with all those other Roman provinces. The public ate this up with a spoon. All these years, no matter how heated Octavian's rhetoric, they'd been reluctant to turn on Marc Antony. But they were happy to think the worst of Cleopatra.
So in late summer of 31 BC, Octavian presided over an ancient and bloody ritual in the temple of the war goddess Bellona. This is a ritual he may have made up. He dipped a spear into the blood of a sacrificed animal, threw it at a patch of sacred ground, and declared war, not against Marc Antony, but against Cleopatra.
So we're going to leave you there with that cliffhanger.
We're just going to leave you there sitting in a toxic stew of xenophobia, racism, and misogyny. Have fun.
Have fun.
This is what we do as a podcast.
We're going to be back in 2 weeks. So in the meantime, connect with us on social at Ancient Hist Fan on Twitter or at Ancient History Fangirl on Facebook and Instagram.
Also, if you want more of us in the meantime, we have a Patreon where you can listen to extra episodes just for subscribers. These are shorter episodes. They've been so far between about 10 and 30 minutes long that deal with things we didn't get to cover in our longer episodes.
So starting at just $2 a month, you can subscribe and get more episodes from us in your feed. And for $10 a month, you can suggest topics. So what have we got in our Patreon feed right now, Jenny?
Well, Pompey and the Pirates was the first one we launched. That's about how Pompey cleared up the Mediterranean pirate problem in about a month.
We also have Julius Caesar critiques the Battle of Winterfell. If you have ever wondered how Julius Caesar would more successfully take on the army of the undead than they did at Winterfell, give it a listen.
Yeah, we've got Tuda, the Illyrian pirate queen. That's a good one. Not done with the pirates.
Oh, we love pirates, and we love giving you tales of strong women. And dropping on December 5th, we have King Herod and Cleopatra Wouldn't Touch You with a Barge Pole, Part 1.
That's a pretty great episode. It's got a lot of intrigue in it. Oh, we also have the Lepisode. That's coming up, or it's already dropped. I forget what we scheduled and when.
I think it's already out.
Yeah, so we've got more about Lepidus. If you want to know about his life and times, we've got a mini-sode on him.
And he is very much the Butters, the ancient world, but he had a fascinating life, and for a lot of reasons we weren't able to cover it in these arcs. A lot of times we see these people who are sort of in the periphery, and it's a really nice deep dive into him.
Yeah, sometimes we just want to cover people in more detail, but we don't have time in the longer arc, so we got the littlest triumvir.
And remember, when we say mini-sodes, the episodes are usually at least 20 minutes.
Yeah, usually. I think we've got a few that are shorter, but they're definitely just episode-sized at this point. There are some that are longer than some of our initial just regular episodes from the very beginning of this podcast.
So you can find all of this at patreon.com/Ancient History Fangirl. And if you're able to, please join.
Yes, please do. So we have some Patreon members to call out and thank, by the way. I think it's just one. Jessica Macri. Thank you so much. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. I hope I didn't.
Thank you so much. The podcast isn't free to produce or maintain, and we can use your help to keep it going. The Patreon is a great way to support us. To get special bonus episodes, you can find the link on our homepage at ancienthistoryfangirl.com or at patreon.com/Ancient History Fangirl.
But if you're not ready to sign up for a monthly thing, we get get it. We totally understand. You can also make a one-time donation to our Ko-Fi account. The link is on the homepage of our website at ancienthistoryfangirl.com, or you can check out our merch. We have some amazing merch going on right now.
We really do. And there's going to be a shirt box blanket, and I need that in my life like yesterday.
There's a Pompey blanket that's actually really cool. I want to get that.
And if you're not in the place to give us money, then leave us a review. But only if it's a nice review. Like, if you're not going to leave a nice review, it's okay. We get it. You don't like us. Why are you still listening?
This is a long-ass episode. Why are you listening to this? Go do something else.
Why do you hate listening to us?
You could be gardening. You could be making muffins.
If you do like us, leave us a nice review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. We always love hearing from you guys. It makes such a difference. And on those days where we're like, oh my God, it's 8 hours of research and writing. What am I going to do? We just think, because of you, we're going to keep going.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.